Chapter 338. Sea dragons were actually ferocious-looking sea monsters. They had sharp heads, big mouths, sharp teeth, and the scales on their bodies were as sharp as blades. However, this group of sea dragons actually had the surname Bai, and they even had such a cute name. Mo Chenga turned her head and held back her laughter for a long time. Then she turned back and said to the old sea dragon, "Help me decide. As long as it's your offspring, I'll take it." The old sea dragon hesitated, then reluctantly looked at the 5 little sea dragons and said to her, "Human, you choose. They're all the same to me. It's hard for me to choose." Upon seeing its expression, Mo Chenga no longer forced it. She nodded and said, "I'll take this one." The one she picked was the youngest sea dragon, by Xiaofan. Seeing that it had been hit, the other 4 sea dragons surrounded it and roared at the same time. They spoke in the language of sea dragons, which Mo Chenga didn't understand. But from their looks, she could guess that they were very close to each other and were reluctant to part. Seeing this, Mo Chenga couldn't help but smile. Ever since she entered the cultivation world, she rarely saw such a scene of brotherly affection. Even though they were demonic beasts, they still made her feel warm. The 5 little sea dragons roared for a while, then the old sea dragon roared and they immediately quieted down. The old sea dragon looked at the little sea dragon called Xiaofan and asked it to swim closer. Then it turned to Mo Chenga and said, "Okay, human, you can sign a spiritual beast contract with my child." Mo Chenga looked at the little sea dragon in front of her. Its tail was still injured and it looked at her timidly. She knew that the little sea dragon almost died under her flying sword, so it must be afraid of her. But it didn't matter. As long as they signed a spiritual beast contract, the little sea dragon would trust her. Mo Chenga closed her eyes and gathered her divine sense. The reason why he chose this little sea dragon was that it was the weakest among all the sea dragons, and its divine sense was also weak, so it would be easier to establish a spirit beast contract. Secondly, it was only 800 years old, but it already had a cultivation of the 5th rank, which showed that it was extremely talented among demonic beasts. Her divine sense came into contact with Bai Xiaofan. Under strong pressure, Bai Xiaofan obediently signed a subordinate contract with Mo Chenga. From this moment on, Mo Chenga was its master. They weren't allowed to hurt each other until their spiritual beast contract was dissolved or until one of them died. Seeing that Mo Chenga opened her eyes and the fear in Xiaofan's eyes faded, old sea dragon Bai Xiaoqing was surprised. So fast. The fact that they finished signing the spiritual beast contract so quickly could only mean that Mo Chenga's divine sense was much stronger than Xiaofan's. Xiaofan was a demonic beast equivalent to a human in the early stage of the core formation realm. Although its divine sense wasn't as good as a human's, it wasn't much weaker. Mo Chenga, on the other hand, was only in the middle stage of the core formation realm. Mo Chenga smiled and waved at Xiaofan. Xiaofan was still timid, but it was no longer afraid of her. It obediently approached her and said, "Master, we've signed a contract. Can you give the spiritual fruit to my grandfather?" "Of course." Mo Chenga took out a healing medicinal pill and threw it into its mouth. "Wait here for a moment." After that, she touched the space between her eyebrows again. After several breaths, she entered the virtual sky world and took out 200 fruits. "Here, this is for you." Mo Chenga handed them to Old Sea Dragon together with the original one. Seeing the 300 fruits, Old Sea Dragon and the 4 little sea dragons' eyes lit up. Old Sea Dragon carefully took them with his fin. With a flash of white light, the 100 fruits disappeared, hidden somewhere. Demonic beasts didn't have things like chenkuan bags, but they had their own storage space, which was much more convenient than humans. "I've given you what I promised. Can you tell me the secret now?" Maybe because of the 100 fruits or because Xiaofan had become her spiritual beast, Old Sea Dragon's voice became a little respectful. "I've told Xiaofan about this in detail. We'll tell you." Mo Chenga nodded. "Okay." Xiaofan was now her spiritual beast, so she wasn't worried that this Old Sea Dragon would go back on its word. "Then our deal is complete." Old Sea Dragon didn't answer. He looked at Xiaofan next to her and sighed. Then the 4 little sea dragons roared again. Xiaofan also roared in response. The 5 little sea dragons gathered together, rubbing their heads against each other and slapping each other with their fins, as if to express their reluctance to part. Mo Chenga smiled and watched them reluctantly say goodbye to each other, but she didn't urge them. After a long time, Old Sea Dragon roared again, interrupting their reluctance to part. Under Old Sea Dragon's scolding, the 4 little sea dragons finally separated from Xiaofan, but they lined up and slapped their tails against the water, as if they were performing some kind of ceremony. Xiaofan looked at them and followed the rhythm, wagging its tail to echo them. After a long time they stopped. Old Sea Dragon turned his head and said to Emo Chinga, "Okay human, you can take Xiaofan away." Emo Chinga nodded gently and saluted them to show respect. "Before I pass away I'll bring Xiaofan back here to reunite with you. If I'm lucky enough to advance to the deification realm, then as long as Xiaofan asks, I'll also terminate the spiritual beast contract and give it back its freedom. I'll take my leave now." Old Sea Dragon floated on the sea with the 4 little sea dragons. He pressed his fins against his chest and bowed his head to her, which seemed to be the etiquette of sea dragons. Under the gazes of 1 old and 4 young sea dragons, Emo Chinga flew to the distant island with Bai Xiaofan and eventually disappeared into the sky. After returning to the island, Emo Chinga took Xiaofan into Emo Yaoqing's cave and treated Xiaofan's wound first. Xiaofan's injury wasn't serious. The sea dragon's armor was very tough, and Emo Chinga wasn't good at using a flying sword. Although her sword had left a wound on its tail, it wasn't to the point where it couldn't move. After taking medicinal pills, the wound quickly healed. Amazing! Xiaofan twisted his head and was stunned to see the wound on his tail disappear. It's gone so soon. Old Sea Dragon Bai Xiaoqing's voice sounded like that of a human old man, while Bai Xiaofan was a human teenager whose voice hadn't changed yet. 800 years old was still a child compared to a 10,000-year lifespan. Emo Chinga asked with a smile, "You don't have medicinal pills. What will you do if you're injured?" Xiaofan said, "We also have healing herbs at the bottom of the sea, but the effect isn't very good. There are also healing spells. Master, I heard that you humans can concoct medicinal pills. These medicinal pills are magical and can help you advance quickly. Is that true?" Emo Chinga couldn't help but laugh. "It's not that magical. It's just that your cultivation will be faster and your advancement will be easier." "Wow, it's much better than us demonic beast." Xiaofan's voice was very happy and it looked at her longingly. "Master, will I also have medicinal pills to eat in the future?" "Of course." Emo Chinga reached out and touched its ferocious-looking head. "You're my spiritual beast, so of course I'll give you medicinal pills." Then she smiled. "By the way, I haven't asked you yet. Does it matter if you leave the water?" Sea dragons were demonic beasts in the sea. Naturally, they could exert their greatest strength in the sea. However, if their spells had taken shape, it wouldn't affect their strength. "It doesn't matter," Xiaofan answered. "Our sea dragon clan spells are innate. Besides, I'm already in the 5th rank, so I can survive without relying on water." As it spoke, it rubbed its head. "Besides, Grandpa has taught me everything. I'm very smart, so I remember everything." There was a trace of pride in its voice as if a child was saying, praise me quickly." Emo Chinga couldn't help but laugh and stroked its head. "You're really so smart. Do you remember all the secrets your grandpa told you?" "Of course." Xiaofan raised its head without hesitation. Emo Chinga laughed even more happily. She stroked its head again and said, "Okay, you're my spiritual beast now. I'll take you to a good place." Xiaofan blinked its eyes and looked at her with confusion. Emo Chinga didn't talk nonsense anymore. She held Xiaofan's head with one hand and touched the space between her eyebrows with the other. A bead emerged and she cast an art on it. After several breaths, the 2 of them appeared in the virtual sky world. Woo woo. As soon as they entered, a golden shadow rushed over and threw itself into Emo Chinga's arms. It was Feifei. She just entered the virtual sky world twice, but she didn't have time to pay attention to it, so it was very depressed. Emo Chinga patted its head and comforted it. "Good Feifei, are you bored? Let Xiaohu play with you for a while, okay? And I have a new friend." Xiaofan was now staring at the surrounding environment with its slender eyes in surprise. It didn't understand how it changed here in an instant, and this space was so rich in spiritual aura. It couldn't help but think that human spells were so magical. This is Xiaofan and this is Feifei. Being pulled by Emo Chinga, Xiaofan regained its senses and stared at the leopard's-like golden furry ball in front of it. It blinked, not understanding what this thing was. However, for demonic beasts, not their own race usually meant hunting. Therefore, it jumped up and floated in the air, baring its sharp teeth at Feifei. Although Feifei had been with Emo Chinga for 60 years and had eaten a lot of spiritual plants, perhaps because of the characteristics of its race, it had always been difficult to advance and was still in the 4th rank. For demonic beasts, the gap between the 4th rank and the 5th rank was very big. In particular, Feifei wasn't good at fights of magical powers. As long as Xiaofan casually waved its fins or tail, Feifei wouldn't be able to resist. The 2 demonic beasts stared at each other. Seeing Xiaofan's fierce eyes, Feifei suddenly stretched out its claws. A white light flashed on its claws and it touched Xiaofan's green scales. In the white light, the fierce light in Xiaofan's eyes gradually dissipated. Although it wasn't her first time seeing it, Mo Qingge still felt it was very magical. Sure enough, Feifei was a magical demonic beast. It was born to live in peace with many demonic beasts, which was an anomaly in the world of demonic beasts. Patting Feifei's head, Mo Qingge released Xiaohua, who had been staying in her spiritual beast bag. You two go play first. Xiaohua, who had just come out of the spiritual beast bag, also showed hostility to Xiaofan, but under Mo Qingge's divine comprehension order, it was quickly pulled away by Feifei to play. Xiaofan, why didn't you attack Feifei just now? Xiaofan's voice was a little confused. I felt that it wasn't dangerous, Mo Qingge nodded. Sure enough, Feifei's special ability was like this. She took a few steps forward and waved her hand. Can you adapt to the spiritual aura here? Xiaofan nodded. And the spiritual aura here is very comfortable. At that moment, its eyes lit up when it saw a large medicinal field. Master, that's... Mo Qingge stood by the stream, pointed at the large medicinal field and said with a smile, You're already my spiritual beast. You can eat those spiritual plants if you want, but you have to be sure that they're not harmful to you. From now on this stream is yours. Get along well with Xiaohua and Feifei. They're also my spiritual beasts, understand? Yes, Master. Chapter 339. Among the three spiritual beasts, Xiaohua and Xiaofan were in the 5th rank, while Feifei was in the 4th rank. Xiaohua was good at fire techniques and possessed Sun Real Fire, which was very powerful. Xiaofan was good at water techniques and grew up in the harsh environment of the sea, so it had a stronger combat power. Although Feifei wasn't strong, it had a special ability to calm people. These three spiritual beasts improved Mo Qingge's strength a lot. She dared to say that there weren't many core formation cultivators in Kunwu who had 2 5th-rank spiritual beasts like her. Spiritual beasts were very difficult to raise. Although there were many cultivators in Kunwu who raised spiritual beasts, they basically couldn't keep up with their cultivation levels. After all, corresponding to their long lifespans, spiritual beasts' cultivation speed was also very slow. Without enough medicinal pills for them to eat, they couldn't keep up with cultivators' cultivation levels at all if they cultivated by themselves. If there were medicinal pills, which cultivator didn't give them to themselves first? Even Lord Daoist Jinghe and Qin Shi couldn't. Lord Daoist Jinghe had a spiritual beast institute, but the highest spiritual beast in it was only in the 7th rank and hadn't reached the 8th rank yet. Qin Shi raised a Chongming bird, which was only in the 5th rank. Because it couldn't keep up with his cultivation level, he usually didn't take it with him. As far as Mo Qingge knew, only Spiritual Beast Sect, one of the 7 great cultivation groups in the Celestial Pole, had spiritual beasts that weren't inferior to cultivators. However, their cultivation technique was special, so they had to start raising spiritual beasts with spiritual beast eggs. Spiritual beast eggs were rare treasures and each person only had one. Therefore, under normal circumstances, there would only be one spiritual beast that truly recognized its master. But Mo Qingge, who had just broken through to the middle stage of the core formation realm, already had 2 5th-rank spiritual beasts. In other words, her fighting strength was equivalent to that of 2 people. Mo Qingge pondered in her heart for a moment before a smile appeared on her face. With these 2 5th-rank demonic beasts, even if she was alone now, she shouldn't be in too much danger. With that thought, she called Xiaofan with her divine comprehension. Xiaofan quickly flew into the bamboo house, still dripping water. It was very happy in the creek outside the house. Although it had no companions, the spiritual aura in the creek was very rich, so it cultivated very quickly. Moreover, there were countless spiritual herbs waiting for it to eat. Master, you called me? Seeing Xiaofan's sharp teeth and hearing its crisp voice, Mo Qingge couldn't help but smile. Are your injuries healed? Yes. Yifan wiped her dripping body with her fins. Instead of landing, she floated in the air. He was a sea beast. Landing on the ground was far less comfortable than floating in the air. Then tell me the secret that your grandfather told you. All right. Lil Fan also had a spirit beast contract, so he was much more obedient than Xiaohua and Feifei. Usually he was either cultivating in the stream or drooling while looking at those spirit grasses. Occasionally he would communicate with Xiaohua and Feifei. Aside from that, no matter what Mo Qingge said, she always complied without any objections, unlike Feifei and Xiaohua, who occasionally came to disturb her. Grandpa said that in about a month's flight to the south of this small island, there will be a large island. There's a volcano on that big island, and the inside of the volcano is empty. You can reach a very deep place along the volcano. Then you can go underground and walk to the end and you can get out from a hot spring. That's Yunzhong's South Pole Island. Your grandfather didn't tell you the exact location? Emo Chenga frowned. The sea was so big and flying in a certain direction was bound to have some deviations. It wouldn't be easy to find this large island. She regretted asking the old sea dragon to lead the way. Master, don't worry. Sensing her mood, Yifan proudly raised his head. We sea beasts have our own way of finding the way in the sea. Grandpa told me so I can take you there. Oh. Hearing Yifan's words, Emo Chenga relaxed her brows. That's good. After a pause she asked, is that road safe? Are there demonic beasts or dangers? Grandpa said that this road was accidentally discovered by my master. It's very dark inside but there's no danger. Emo Chenga nodded and patted Yifan's head. Go back and continue your cultivation. I'll call you when I need you. Yes, Yifan answered obediently, wagged his tail and flew back to the stream. Emo Chenga sat cross-legged on the rush cushion, lost in thought. If she was asked if she wanted to go to Yunzhong, the answer would be yes. Through Emo Yaoqing's records, she knew that Yunzhong was such a prosperous cultivation world, so how could she not yearn for it? Her talent was already high enough. Spirit stones, offerings from the elders of Xianqing School and Bishuan Court, plus the harvest from the trip to Demonic Mountain, she had an amazing amount of spirit stones. Medicinal pills at least before she reached the nascent soul realm, and it wasn't like she didn't have medicinal pills after that. Apart from that, what else did she not have? That was experience, a wealth of experience and a broad horizon. She wanted to see what other continents were like. She wanted to know if Confucian and Buddhist cultivators were the same as Tao cultivators like them. She also wanted to know everything Emo Yaoqing had faced. She couldn't suppress this desire because she knew that this was what she lacked the most on her path of cultivation. However, leaving the celestial pole to go to Yunzhong wasn't a simple matter, even if she knew the exact safe route. First, it was too far and second, it would take too long. Both were prone to accidents. She even considered going to Yunzhong after returning to Xianqing School and waiting for Qinshi to come out of his closed-door meditation. However, this would take at least 10 or 20 years. 10 or 20 years wasn't a long time for nascent soul cultivators and even core formation cultivators, but if she wanted to catch up with Qinshi, she had to make good use of her time. She had just advanced, so she needed to travel to strengthen her mental state before she could continue her closed-door meditation. It was definitely unwise to enter closed-door meditation now. After thinking for a while, Emo Chenga finally decided that she would go to Yunzhong now, alone. Of course, before that she still had to arrange a lot of things. After all, going to such a far place like Yunzhong would take about a year on the road, and it might take more than 10 years to finish the trip. During this time, Qin Shi and Lord Taoist Jinghe would both be in closed-door meditation, so to avoid accidents, she had to leave some spiritual plans for them. After making her decision, Emo Chenga quickly put it into action. First, she planned to return to Linhai. Although it took several months to find this place, it only took 1 month to return. Because those months were spent searching, she often went the wrong way, but this time she had the exact route. After returning to Linhai, Emo Chenga rested for a while, then went back to Kunwu through Bishuan Court's transporting formation. She then traveled day and night back to Xianqing School. When she finally returned to Xianqing School, the first thing she did was to see Qinshi. Although he was in closed-door meditation, Qinshi only wanted to stabilize his realm this time, so he didn't need to pay too much attention to it. Emo Chenga only touched the restrictions outside, so he stopped cultivating and opened the door of the closed-door meditation room. Why did it take you so long to come back? Qinshi smiled when he saw her. Emo Chenga walked towards him and the two of them naturally hugged. It feels like a long time, she said with a sigh, although it hasn't even been a year. Qinshi also felt this way, so he didn't say anything and just hugged her even tighter. After a while, the two of them had enough hugging and separated slightly. Qinshi asked with a smile, "You advanced to the middle stage. It seems your trip was very fruitful. Where did you go?" Emo Chenga leaned against him, laid down, and leaned her head on his lap. She then tilted her head to look at him. "Guess." "That I can't guess." Qinshi fiddled with her hair, his gaze gentle. "But seeing you so happy, it must be a good thing, right?" "Of course." Emo Chenga smiled proudly and no longer hid anything. She told him in detail about her experiences in the past year. Qinshi listened very carefully. When Emo Chenga said there was a passage between the celestial pole and Yunzhong, his pupils shrank and he said keenly, "Yunzhong? You want to go to Yunzhong?" The two of them had similar characters and lived together for more than 10 years, so they had a tacit understanding. Emo Chinga wasn't surprised that he guessed her intentions at all. She nodded. Yes, I want to go to Yunzhong. The cultivators in the Celestial Pole are all trapped on the spirit vein in Kunwu, so I want to go to Yunzhong to see the wider world. Qin Shi didn't say anything, but his expression was very solemn. Emo Chinga's expression also became serious. She straightened up and asked, "What's wrong? Is it inappropriate?" No. Qin Shi breathed a sigh of relief, held her in his arms and said with a sigh, "It's just that I can't go with you right now." He just advanced to the nascent soul realm, so stabilizing his realm was the most important thing. I know. Emo Chinga paused for a moment but still said, "So I decided to go alone." The hand holding her froze. After a while, Qin Shi let go of her and looked straight into her eyes. "Are you sure?" Emo Chinga nodded. "I'm not a troublemaker. You know this. My current strength is enough to protect myself. There won't be a problem for me to go to Yunzhong alone." Qin Shi frowned and didn't say anything for a long time. This matter was too important. Although he had slowly accepted Emo Chinga's idea and was willing to let her travel alone, going to Yunzhong was still too dangerous. Emo Chinga also didn't say anything. It wasn't that she didn't know what Qin Shi was thinking, but she had to take Qin Shi's opinion into consideration for such an important matter. Is there a way to compromise? After a long time, Qin Shi said, "I won't stop you if you want to go to Yunzhong, but I won't feel at ease letting you go alone like this. It's too far, and if something happens I won't be able to save you in time." Emo Chinga thought for a while and said hesitantly, "How about I draw a map for you and you come out of closed-door meditation to find me?" Qin Shi didn't say anything. Emo Chinga scratched her head, feeling a bit distressed. "You can't come out of closed-door meditation now and I can't wait. Do you still not trust me to protect myself?" Qin Shi's gaze softened. He looked at her and said gently, "It's not that I don't trust you, but I'm too worried. I know you can protect yourself, but in any case I'll be worried if you're not by my side." This time, Emo Chinga didn't say anything. She was very touched. After a while she said, "How about I ask Master?" Qin Shi thought about it and nodded. "That's fine. Master should give us good advice." Chapter 340. A year passed, but Lord Taoist Jinghe never left his immortal's cave. According to the maids, Grandmaster didn't even make a sound this whole year. The closed-door meditation room had always been quiet. When Qin Shi and Emo Chinga heard this, they glanced at each other in astonishment. It wasn't that he was surprised that his master's injuries were so serious, but that he actually held himself back for so long without speaking. It was really not easy. The two of them went to the closed-door meditation room together. After Qin Shi made a set of hand seals, Lord Taoist Jinghe's voice rang out. Chinga, what's the matter?" Before entering closed-door meditation this time, Lord Taoist Jinghe once said he wouldn't come out within 10 years. It had only been a year now. Qin Shi raised his voice and said, "Master, we have something we want to ask for your opinion on." There was no more sound coming from the room. After a while, the stone door slowly opened. After the two of them entered, the stone door closed. When Emo Chinga saw Lord Taoist Jinghe sitting cross-legged, regulating his breath and healing his injuries, his complexion looked a lot better. At the very least he no longer looked old. She felt a little more at ease. From the looks of it, her master's injuries were much better. "Master, how are your injuries?" Lord Taoist Jinghe opened his eyes. When he saw them he smiled and said, "Fortunately you guys brought back those spiritual panaceas. Master's injuries are much better now. Moreover, maybe it'll be a blessing in disguise." Emo Chinga and Qin Shi were bewildered. They glanced at each other and simultaneously thought of a possibility. They were both pleasantly surprised. "Master, you have a chance to make a realm breakthrough?" Lord Taoist Jinghe nodded. Although his appearance hadn't recovered yet, his expression was beaming with joy like before. "Not bad. In this 1 year of closed-door meditation to heal my injuries, I've already comprehended something. The late stage of the nascent soul realm isn't like before, where there was an insurmountable gap." This was a pleasant surprise. Both Qin Shi and Emo Chinga were overjoyed. They said in unison, "Congratulations, Master." Lord Taoist Jinghe waved his hand and restrained himself a little. "It's just a possibility. It'll take at least 20 to 30 years to heal my injuries, let alone make a realm breakthrough." Right after he finished speaking he asked them, "Since you came here, what do you want to ask?" "Yes. Master, according to your suggestion, I entered closed-door meditation a year ago, while Chinga went out for a walk. Soon after, the two of them roughly recounted Emo Chinga's experiences in the past year. After Lord Taoist Jinghe listened, He first probed Mo Chenga's cultivation level, then praised her. Not bad. Although you've just advanced to the middle stage, your spiritual aura is very stable. The two of you dual cultivating is indeed a match made in heaven. Speaking of dual cultivation, Mo Chenga was still a bit embarrassed, so she immediately changed the subject. Master, give me some advice. What should we do now? What should we do? Lord Daoist Jinghe was flabbergasted. What should we do is naturally up to you. Why are you asking me? Master. Mo Chenga's eyes widened. We came to ask for your opinion. Lord Daoist Jinghe spread his hands and said, my opinion is that you guys should do as you see fit. Mo Chenga and Qin Shi were both speechless. After thinking for a while, Qin Shi said, Master, I think it's too dangerous to let Chenga go to Yunzhong alone. What do you think? Danger? Lord Daoist Jinghe's gaze lingered on Mo Chenga for a while before he finally looked at Qin Shi. When you were in the middle stage of the core formation realm, did Master ever stop you from doing what you wanted to do? Qin Shi blushed and answered, no. In fact, after he formed his gold core, he rarely stayed in the sect except for closed-door meditation. He often went out for several years at a time, but he felt it was different, so he emphasized, but she's going to Yunzhong? Lord Daoist Jinghe curled his lips. So what if it's Yunzhong? Is it different from the celestial pole? Are there high-level cultivators all over the streets? Or are core formation cultivators especially good at fighting? Qin Shi was completely speechless. Mo Chenga asked happily, Master, you don't object? Right after she finished talking about Qin Shi, Lord Daoist Jinghe turned around and glared at her. You want to go to such a distant place? Have you prepared everything? Have you arranged everything? What about the plan? Mo Chenga was embarrassed by the three questions. She said, aren't I asking for your opinion? If I'm sure I'll go, of course I'll arrange everything. Umph. Lord Daoist Jinghe said rudely, that's what you say, but the two of you are the same. You've already made a decision, so why are you asking? Don't you just want me to help you persuade someone? Mo Chenga was also completely speechless. You came to disturb my closed-door meditation for this kind of thing? Are you bored? Both of you get out. Just tell me if you want to go or not. How old are you? In Lord Daoist Jinghe's complaints, the two of them were kicked out of the closed-door meditation room. After they left the closed-door meditation room, the stone door behind them shut them out. Qin Shi and Mo Chenga looked at each other and saw helplessness in each other's eyes. They had no choice but to go back first. They returned to their cave in silence, each with their own thoughts. As soon as they opened the stone door, Yi Jinji's cheerful voice came immediately. Anti-Master, you're back. Mo Chenga forced a smile, but when she looked up, she was stunned. A foundation-building female disciple was standing next to Yi Jinji. She was dressed in Shenqing School's robe, looking plain and gentle. Although she wasn't stunningly beautiful, she could still make people's eyes light up. When the woman saw them, she bowed and said, Grandmaster Shoujing, Martial Uncle Qingwei. Mo Chenga recognized the voice as soon as she heard it. It was Shui Linbua. Judging from her appearance, her injuries had healed? No need to be so polite, Qin Shi replied faintly. Then he looked at Yi Jinji. Are you going to move back? Yi Jinji looked at them and scratched his head a little embarrassedly. Master. Wasn't this a joke that he had been living with Linbua in Mingxin residence? Mo Chenga knew he was thin-skinned, so she glared at Qin Shi and said with a smile, Linbua's injuries have healed? Upon hearing that, Shui Linbua stepped forward and saluted again. Thank you for your kindness, Martial Uncle Qingwei. Thanks to you, disciples' injuries have healed a lot. Mo Chenga nodded with a smile. Shui Linbua's behavior was well-mannered, and she looked much more mature than Yi Jinji. Auntie. Yi Jinji said with a smile, you've been out for a long time. I haven't congratulated you on your realm breakthrough. Mo Chenga smiled. You've made progress in your cultivation recently, but you still have to work hard. You've been in the middle stage of the foundation building realm for so long, so you should think of a way to advance to the late stage. And I know. I've been cultivating hard. Don't worry, Auntie. After encouraging them with a few more words, Mo Chenga said, Jinji, your master and I have something to do. You can go ahead. Oh, okay, Yi Jinji answered, watched the two of them go back to the cultivation room and closed the stone door. Upon seeing them, Mo Chenga remembered to ask, has Shui Linbua's injuries healed? More or less. Qin Shi didn't care much. I heard from Jinji that martial nephew Han Rua of Seoul's Retreat Peak has excellent medical skills. I don't know what method he used to repair her dantian, but she's been feeling better these days and can come out and walk around. Han Rua was Kuang Zhu's Taoist name, but Mo Chinga felt that Kuang Zhu's real name was the most suitable for that senior martial brother. Speaking of this, Qin Shi asked again, "What do you think about this Shui Linbua?" Mo Chinga was stunned and asked, "What do I think? Jinji likes her, so what do you want me to think? Don't you like her and want to take her as your disciple?" "Oh, about that." Mo Chinga remembered what she said. After thinking for a moment, she said, "Even if I want to take her as my disciple, it's not the right time to leave now. Besides, if I take her as my disciple, it'll be like reaching the sky in a single bound for her. It might even affect her cultivation, so it's better to let her grow up first." "What you said makes sense." Qin Shi thought for a moment and agreed with her. Seriously speaking, she's a talented person. Since she's better, she often comes to help Jinji manage the cave. I can see that she's steadier than Jinji, but I don't trust her completely, so I can't entrust some things to her. Speaking of this, Mo Chinga said with a smile, "When I went to Linhai this time, I took the opportunity to inquire about her. What she said was true and her background wasn't fake. Of course, even if we want to cultivate her, I think we should take it slow. She's not a formal disciple of the sect. If she reaches the sky in a single bound, it'll be inconvenient for her to make friends with other disciples." "You're right." Qin Shi agreed. "In that case, when she recovers, we'll let her choose another cave and put her in the register like ordinary disciples. However, we can record her in the steward's hall and let her work here. If she's really reliable and worth cultivating, we'll naturally accept her as a disciple. That way, with her reminders from time to time, we won't have to worry about Jinji. Moreover, we can also concentrate on our cultivation if we have a disciple to do things for us in the future." Mo Chinga thought about it and felt his idea was good, so she had no objection. "And let's do that." In Xianqing School, after becoming a core formation cultivator, people rarely appeared in front of others, and all matters were handled by disciples. There were very few people like Mo Chinga and Qin Shi. Yi Jinji was Qin Shi's only disciple, so Mo Chinga didn't have time to accept him. Now the two of them should consider this matter. Otherwise, it would be very inconvenient to have no trusted disciples in the school. After they finished talking about this, the two of them were silent for a while. After a while, they opened their mouths at the same time. Seeing that Mo Chinga also wanted to say something, they shut their mouths. The two of them looked at each other for a while. Mo Chinga coughed and said, "About that matter, do you agree?" After going around in circles, they finally reached the point. Qin Shi was silent for a while before he sighed. "I know. In fact, Master still spoke for you, but Master also scolded me," Mo Chinga muttered. "That's true, but..." Qin Shi smiled bitterly. "Alright, going to Yunzhong isn't a big deal. You're already a core formation cultivator, so you can deal with many things by yourself." He recalled that after he formed his gold core, he dared to go to any dangerous place. It was also those experiences that made him grow up quickly. Thinking about it this way, it was good for Mo Chinga to travel more. He didn't have any objection, but Mo Chinga actually felt embarrassed. She thought for a while, then said, "How about this? I'll leave the specific route to you. If I don't come back and you're worried, you can come to me, N." Qin Shi answered softly, then said, "Don't forget Wanderer Ziwei's request. These days, the steward's hall has been helping you find clues. When there are clues, I'll accompany you to finish this matter." "I'll remember." Chapter 341. Since she was determined to go to Yunzhong, Mo Chinga was busy these days. First of all, she had to refine the magic weapons she got from Mo Yaoqing's cave one by one so that she could fight with ease. Second, she had to leave enough medicinal pills for Qin Shi and Lord Daoist Jinghe for emergencies. Finally, she had to learn about Yunzhong as much as possible. Qin Shi paused his closed-door meditation to look for records about Yunzhong. To his surprise, Lord Daoist Jinyang actually knew something about Yunzhong. "You want to go to Yunzhong?" Lord Daoist Jinyang was quite surprised to hear him ask about Yunzhong. "Well?" Qin Shi paused and said frankly, "Tienga wants to go to Yunzhong." Lord Daoist Jinyang was puzzled. "It's not easy to go to Yunzhong. The South Sea is very dangerous. Even nascent soul cultivators can't cross the South Sea easily, let alone a core formation cultivator. Your master also knows about this, so why didn't he stop her?" Qin Shi said with a smile, "Tienga found a way to get there safely from the East Sea." "Is that so?" Lord Daoist Jinyang was even more surprised. After thinking about it, he was very happy. "This is good. Yunzhong is a holy land for cultivation. If she can travel there, she'll definitely gain something. By the way, if she's sure this way is safe, We can let all the core formation cultivators in the school go there to gain experience and communicate with the cultivators in Yunzhong. Also, it's said that Yunzhong is very rich in cultivation resources. If Qingwei goes there, she can exchange some rare treasures in Kunwu with them. And this is a good way to make money. In the end, Lord Taoist Jinyang began to calculate how much profit this way could bring. If they could bring some of Kunwu's specialties to Yunzhong and exchange them for rare treasures in Kunwu, Xinqing School could gain a lot from it. With resources, he would be able to cultivate another batch of disciples. Qinshi was helpless to see him like this. Although this senior martial brother Jinyang was a late-stage nascent soul cultivator, he was responsible for the school and was always very enthusiastic about these things. Senior martial brother Jinyang, it seems you know about Yunzhong's situation? His attention was drawn back. Lord Taoist Jinyang stroked his beard and said with a smile, although we don't have much contact with Yunzhong across the South Sea, occasionally Yunzhong cultivators accidentally come to the Celestial Pole. In the past, I met a cultivator from Yunzhong and heard some things about Yunzhong from him. Oh, how long ago was that? What was the cultivation level of this cultivator? Is he from the South Sea? Oh, it's been 500 or 600 years. Lord Taoist Jinyang recalled. At that time, I was only in the early stage of the nascent soul realm, and I met a cultivator in the same realm as me by chance. He was also in the early stage of the nascent soul realm, and his means were very powerful. We had a fight, but it ended in a draw, so we admired each other and became good friends. He did come here via the South Sea. According to him, the South Sea is very dangerous and there are many high-level sea beasts there. He was lucky and managed to escape every time. Even so, it took him 2 years to reach the Celestial Pole. An early-stage nascent soul cultivator can cross the South Sea? Qinshi was quite astonished. Wasn't it said that even late-stage nascent soul cultivators were likely to lament their inadequacy? Upon seeing Qinshi's expression, Lord Taoist Jinyang chuckled and said, "Don't think he's ordinary. I can't say much about other things, but this person's escaping skills are top-notch. I dare say that even cultivators in the late nascent soul stage wouldn't be able to stop him. Even so, he had almost died in the South Sea despite his abilities. Therefore, if Qingwei really found a safe path, it'll be extremely beneficial to our entire sect." Qinshi wasn't interested in this matter, so he just asked, "Senior Martial Brother Jinyang, can you tell me what's the situation in Yunzhong?" About that. Lord Taoist Jinyang recalled and said slowly, "The spirit veins in Yunzhong are very widely distributed, so there are a lot of cultivators. In addition to Tao cultivators, there are also Confucian cultivators, Buddhist cultivators, demon cultivators and devil cultivators. Among them, Taoism, Buddhism and Confucianism are called the righteous path, while demons and devils are called the evil path. Of course, the so-called righteous path and evil path are equivalent to our classification of righteous path and devil path. It's not that the righteous path is justice and the evil path is evil. Their righteous path and evil path are all mixed together and there are very few disputes." Qinshi patiently listened to Lord Taoist Jinyang for a long time, but in the end, it was all things recorded on Mo Yaoqing's jade slip. Taking advantage of Lord Taoist Jinyang's recollection, Qinshi hurriedly asked, "Senior Martial Brother Jinyang, is there anything I need to pay attention to in Yunzhong? These things aren't important." "Oh, about that." Lord Taoist Jinyang thought for a moment then said, "It's nothing, but let Qingwei pay attention to one thing. The fighting methods of the cultivators in Yunzhong are different from those in the Celestial Pole, so before you get familiar with them, don't easily fight with others." "Oh." Qinshi's interest was piqued. "What's the difference?" Lord Taoist Jinyang said, "It's a bit complicated. First, their magic weapons focus on speed, so you must be careful not to be preemptively attacked by others. Second, they have many magic weapons that can interfere with the operation of other people's spiritual aura. If you don't pay attention, it's easy to fall into their trap." This was something Mo Yaoqing didn't explain in detail, but it was very helpful to Mo Tiange. When Lord Taoist Jinyang finished, before leaving, Qinshi asked again, "Senior Martial Brother Jinyang, what happened to the cultivator in Yunzhong who came to the Celestial Pole?" Lord Taoist Jinyang was stunned, then he answered, "He stayed in the Celestial Pole for several years, but in the end he still wanted to return to Yunzhong. After he left, we haven't heard any news about him. Maybe he died in the South Sea or maybe he safely returned to Yunzhong." Qinshi was silent, then he sighed and stood up. "Thank you for telling me this, Senior Martial Brother Jinyang. I'll tell Qingge about many things, so I'll go back first." "Hey Shoujing." Lord Taoist Jinyang shouted behind him, "Remember to let Qingwei pay more attention to any special spiritual objects that can be exchanged." Asterisk 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 Mo Chenga was cleaning the virtual sky world. Even if there were jade boxes, spiritual talismans and other things that could seal the spiritual aura of 10,000-year-old spiritual plants would always lose their spiritual nature after being stored for a long time, and they could be stored longer if they were refined into medicinal pills. During the 10 years she and Qin were trapped in the virtual sky world, they refined a lot of medicinal pills, and most of them could be kept. In addition, Qin prepared a lot of things for her. Although most of them were useless, they were his kind intentions, so she accepted them all. In fact, she had a purpose for going to Yunzhong that she didn't tell them. Mo Yaoqing once said that her art of Sunu came from Danxia sect, and the art of Sunu and Danxia sect even included the parts above the nascent soul realm. If she had a chance, she wanted to get that cultivation technique from Danxia sect and compare it with her own. Maybe it would give her some inspiration. Of course, this was just in passing. If it was difficult to achieve her purpose, she wouldn't force it. While she was cleaning, she heard Qin calling her from outside. Tienga? She opened the virtual sky world and Qin came in. Thinking about this virtual sky world, she could clearly feel that her virtual sky world wasn't as profound as Zhong Muling's. Was it because her realm wasn't high enough? What? Are you all ready? Qin looked at the bottles and jars on the floor. What are these for? For you and Master. Mo Chenga counted them one by one. These are for Master, these are for you, and these are for Jinji. As for this box, it's for spiritual beasts, so I'll give it to you. Qin looked at these things and was stunned. So many? Not only did they cover the whole table, but there were also a lot of them on the floor. These medicinal pills would probably last them for 100 years. Mo Chenga said, these are the finished products we concocted last time. I've kept the medicinal pills for the core formation realm, and the rest are for you. Qin thought for a moment. He and his master were in the nascent soul realm, and Jinji was in the foundation building realm, so they just happened to be in the nascent soul realm. It wouldn't affect her, so he said, all right, I'll take these out later. By the way, I went to ask Senior Marshal Brother Xinjiang just now. He told me to tell you something. After listening to Qin repeat what Lord Daoist Xinjiang said, she felt helpless. Why is Marshal Uncle Xinjiang so wordy? It's not like I'm going there to do business. Qin understood her mood very well. He said with a smile, he's the head Grand Supreme Elder, so of course the things he thinks about are different from us. You should listen to him a little. Mo Chenga also knew that as a sect elder, she naturally had to think about things that were beneficial to Xianqing school. After tidying up everything, she said, okay, pack up your things and go out. When the two of them came out of the virtual sky world, Mo Chenga called Yi Jinji and Shui Linbo over. Auntie Master. Greetings to Grandmaster Shoujing, Marshal Uncle Qingwei. No need to be so polite. Mo Chenga looked up. Shui Linbo was still as steady and well-mannered as an ordinary disciple. She didn't seem complacent because of her relationship with Jinji. She nodded secretly. If Shui Linbo treated people like this, it would make up for Jinji's shortcomings, and she could do things at ease in the future. Auntie Master, why did you call us here? Yi Jinji couldn't help but ask cautiously when he saw their serious expressions. Qin glanced at him and said, your aunt has to go out for a while. It may take a long time, so I called you here to tell you something. Huh? Yi Jinji looked at Mo Chenga. Auntie, are you going out to do something? Or travel? I'm going out to travel. Mo Chenga said with a smile, you don't have to worry too much about it. It's just that this time I may be out for a long time. But, Auntie, didn't you just come back? Yi Jinji was puzzled. You guys didn't return for 10 years and it's only been 2 years since you came back, but Auntie went out again. This time it's only been a month. Auntie, is there something important for you to go out so frequently? She couldn't explain it clearly in a short time, so Mo Chenga didn't explain in detail. She just said, there's something but it's not a big deal. Jinji, Auntie may be away for a few years to more than 10 years this time. During this time, your master has to enter closed-door meditation to stabilize his realm, and your grandmaster happens to be healing his injuries, so you have to rely on yourself for cultivation. Don't worry, Auntie, Yi Jinji said, I'll do as I see fit. If there's anything I don't understand, I can communicate with my fellow martial brothers. If I still don't understand, I can ask Martial Uncle Mingjin. When you're not here, I'll take good care of the cave. And? Mo Chenga nodded with a smile and turned to Shui Linbo. Linbo, I've discussed it with your Grandmaster Shoujing. After you recover from your injuries, go to the Steward's Hall to register and officially belong to my Clear Spring Peak. In addition, while your Grandmaster Shoujing is in closed-door meditation, you'll help Jinji take care of the cave. You can inform the steward's hall about this. Upon hearing this, Shui Linbo was overjoyed and excitedly bowed to express her gratitude. Thank you, Martial Uncle Qingwei. Thank you, Grandmaster Shoujing. I'll do my best. Amo Chinga smiled. Shui Linbo was a smart person and knew they were giving her a chance. As long as she seized the opportunity, she would be a real talent, and they wouldn't treat her unfairly in the future. Chapter 342. Several days later, 2 escape lights rose from Clear Spring Peak. After a short pause, the white one flew over Mount Taikong and disappeared into the sky. The red streak remained in midair and did not move for a long time. After a while, Qin Shi sighed softly. He looked at the empty sky, waved his sleeves and landed. Since Mo Chenga was gone, he should continue his closed-door meditation. He knew very well that as a cultivator, this kind of separation was normal, so he just suppressed the slight reluctance in his heart and calmly returned to his cave. Master. Yi Jinji greeted him. Qin Shi smiled. Go cultivate. Your aunt is not here, so you have to be more serious, understand? Yi Jinji smiled. Master, don't worry. I'm not a child anymore. I know these things. Qin Shi was stunned. Thinking of this child's performance in the past 3 years, he also smiled. After all you've gone through experience, you're different now. He walked into his closed-door meditation room with his hands behind his back and said, I won't come out for 10 years, so I'll leave the cave to you. Don't disturb me unless it's urgent. Got it, Master. Mo Chinga traveled at a moderate pace. Half a month later, she appeared in Linhai again. This time she already had a goal, so she just greeted Wei Haolan and went out of the sea along the familiar route. As soon as Xiaofan was in the sea, it became very excited and happily flopped in the sea. Although there was water in the virtual sky world, the stream wasn't the sea, and it was a sea beast that lived in the sea since it was a child. Mo Chinga smiled as she watched it swim round and round. Finally it returned to her side, raised its head and said, Master, where are we going? To the place your grandfather said, she said, but you're not familiar with this place, so come back first. I'll take you flying. No need. Xiaofan flicked its tail, jumped from the water flexibly and made a beautiful arc. This is the sea. We sea dragons can smell the sea, so we won't get lost in the sea. Mo Chenga was stunned. You've never been here. It's so far from where you live. Can you swim back? Yes. Yifan nodded seriously. Master, don't worry. This is the instinct of us sea dragons. As it spoke, it looked at her pitifully. Master, can you sit on me and I'll swim you to the destination? I want to swim. Faced with such a pleading gaze, what else could Mo Chenga say? She looked down and saw that its injury had healed. Its tail was strong and flexible. The strength of that swing just now could probably crack a stone. Of course, it would not be a problem for her to sit on it. Alright, let me know if you're tired. Yes. Yifan jumped up happily and fell back into the water. She said hurriedly, Master, come up quickly. We'll leave now. Upon seeing its impatient appearance, Mo Chenga couldn't help but smile. She cast a simple water-repelling art, then sat on Xiaofan's back and let it lead the way. Xiaofan's body was more than 10 feet long, its tail was flexible and its fins were powerful. In the sea it was like an arrow leaving the bow. Although its speed was not as fast as her escape light, it was not much slower. In the beginning, Mo Chenga still compared the route she had corrected to see if she was swimming in the right direction. Later, she found that Xiaofan's sense of direction in the sea was extremely accurate, so she no longer paid attention to it. Instead, she used the time on the road to study Mo Yaoqing's cultivation experience. One person and one beast swam leisurely to the depths of the East Sea. In the coastal waters there were only some low-rank sea beasts. When those sea beasts saw the 5th-rank Xiaofan, they naturally didn't dare to approach. As they went deeper and deeper into the East Sea, although some high-level sea beasts appeared occasionally, they didn't dare to approach Mo Chenga because of her powerful momentum. A 6th-rank person and a 5th-rank sea dragon. Ordinary sea beasts couldn't afford to provoke them. 2 months later, when Mo Chenga felt the pressure of a 7th-rank sea beast, she reluctantly put Xiaofan into the spiritual beast bag and flew high in the sky with her cloud-treading boots. The deeper they went, the higher the rank of the sea beasts. This time she had a clear goal. It was better to avoid these sea beasts. When the aura of the 7th-rank sea beast disappeared, Mo Chenga released Xiaofan and asked, Xiaofan, can you point the way if we're not in the sea? Xiaofan floated in the air and nodded. I can, but it'll be a little slow. And that's good. It didn't matter if it was a little slow, but the most important thing was safety. If Xiaofan swam in the sea, the human cultivator's aura would probably alarm those high-level demonic beasts, and a fierce battle would be inevitable. If they flew in the air, as long as they were high enough, those demonic beasts wouldn't be able to sense them accurately, and they generally wouldn't act rashly. The boring journey lasted for 4 months. The 1 month the old sea dragon said was Mo Yaoqing's speed. When they arrived in the celestial pole, Mo Yaoqing was already a nascent soul cultivator. Even if they just traveled leisurely, her speed was much faster than Mo Tianga's. 4 months later, seeing that there were more and more high-level sea beasts around, Mo Chinga finally found the big island with the volcano. She breathed a sigh of relief. If she still couldn't find it, she would have to consider going back first. 7th-rank sea beasts were quite common here, and maybe an 8th-rank sea beast would appear at any time. That would be dangerous. Master, it's there. Xiaofan's voice rang in her mind. Mo Chinga looked down and saw that the big island had a circumference of several hundred miles, more than 10 times larger than the small island where Mo Yaoqing lived. Moreover, the terrain was completely different. Most of the island was rocky, overgrown with ravines and mixed with sand and stones. There was only a small amount of soil, so even plants were rare. The most important thing was that there was no spiritual aura on the island, so there weren't even demonic beasts nearby. This was good news for Mo Tianga. There were no spirit veins on the island, so it couldn't attract demonic beasts, so she didn't have to face any unknown demonic beasts. In the center of the island there was a bulging volcano. There was no trace of an eruption, and it was cold without a trace of heat. Mo Chinga flew to the top of the volcano and looked down. It was dark inside and she couldn't see anything clearly. She scanned it with her divine sense and didn't find any danger, so she slowly descended to the crater. As she descended lower and lower, Mo Chinga gradually saw what was inside the volcano. There was no lava, no heat, only cold volcanic walls. It was very dark inside, so she couldn't see anything clearly. Mo Chinga opened her palm and light gathered in it. The heaven and earth fan appeared in her hand, and the fan pendant emitted a faint white light. When she explored Mo Yaoqing's cave last time, she felt it was very inconvenient to take out the Mother Moonstone for illumination, so she simply polished the Mother Moonstone into a fan pendant and hung it on the heaven and earth fan, which was much more convenient to hold. Grandpa said there's water down there, so let me go down first, said Xiaofan, who landed behind her. Mo Chinga paused and nodded. And not long after Xiaofan landed, Mo Chinga heard the sound of water, and then Xiaofan's voice rang out. Master, come down. The water isn't very deep. Holding the heaven and earth fan, Mo Chinga carefully descended to the bottom of the volcano. She looked up and was a little stunned. Is there a road here? There was a shallow stream at the bottom of the volcano, but she didn't see any road around. In the water, Xiaofan said, Master, sit on my back. After thinking for a short while, Mo Chinga cast a water avoidance spell and sat on Xiaofan's back. Xiaofan flicked its tail and suddenly dived into the water. The Mother Moonstone emitted a faint light, but it only illuminated the narrow space around it. Mo Chinga released her divine sense and found that there was a passage in the water, but she didn't know where it led. As soon as Xiaofan entered the water, it was extremely vigorous. After swimming for a while, it sped up. Mo Chinga only felt that it dived deeper and deeper, and the pressure on the water avoidance spell's spiritual aura shield also increased. Of course, she was now a core formation cultivator, so the pressure at the bottom of the water was nothing to her, but she was confused. Water flowed downwards and Xiaofan dived into the water. Was this a waterway? According to the fragmentary records on Mo Yaoqing's jade slip, it took her a lot of time to come to the celestial pole. Did she have to dive in the water for several months? Fortunately, she didn't doubt it for too long. After swimming for a long time, Xiaofan began to float up. The speed at which it floated up was getting faster and faster. Suddenly, with a splash, a person and a beast broke out of the water. Countless water droplets dripped from the spiritual aura shield. Mo Chinga waved her hand, removed the water avoidance spell, and released her divine sense. This was an underground river. It was winding and led to a very far place, and her divine sense couldn't feel the end. As for the surrounding rock walls, they were completely irregular in shape. Xiaofan carried her and swam forward slowly. The river was very cold. Even though it was a demonic beast, it still felt uncomfortable. Xiaofan, how about I take you flying? Xiaofan shook its head and refused. No, master, I like the feeling of swimming in the water. But this water? It's okay. Xiaofan patted its tail. In an instant, a layer of green aura emerged from its scales and wrapped its whole body. This way I won't feel uncomfortable. Mo Chenga looked at it carefully and found that it was also a kind of protective spiritual aura, so she nodded. Okay. They didn't know how long they swam in the dark river. There was only the sound of water and Xiaofan swimming around them. Mo Chenga held the heaven and earth fan and let her divine sense spread all the time. There were no spirit veins in this river, so even if there were fish in the water, they were just ordinary fish and didn't dare to approach her and Xiaofan. Several days later, Mo Chenga frowned and sensed spiritual aura. Then Xiaofan also stopped. Master, there are spirit veins ahead. Mo Chenga used her divine sense to observe for a while and said, there are no living things. Let's continue. Xiaofan responded and continued to swim forward. The spiritual aura was getting thicker and thicker. Mo Chenga looked at the surrounding rock walls and found that it was a spirit stone mine. However, the grade of the spirit stones was not very high. It seemed to be a small mine. One person and one beast passed through the middle of the spirit stone mine. With her sharp eyes, Mo Chenga found that something seemed to be growing on a spirit stone and said hurriedly, wait. Xiaofan stopped. What's wrong? From the rock wall, Mo Chenga carefully dug out a piece of jade that was shining with a sparkling white light and examined it carefully. Spirit gathering stone? Looking at the jade in her hand, she was surprised. It's actually a spirit gathering stone. Hearing the sound, Xiaofan asked curiously, Master, what's a spirit gathering stone? After confirming that the thing in her hand was indeed a spirit gathering stone, Mo Chenga put it into her chinquan bag and said, a spirit gathering stone is a kind of jade that occasionally appears in spirit stone mines. It looks similar to spirit stones, but it has an effect of greatly condensing spiritual aura. In the process of concocting pills and refining tools, how to condense spiritual aura and seal it in medicinal pills and magic weapons is the most difficult process. With a spirit gathering stone, the success rate of concocting pills and refining tools can be improved. Demonic beasts didn't understand concocting pills and refining tools, so Xiaofan only responded with a half understanding. Mo Chenga didn't expect that a spirit gathering stone would appear in this small mine, but she was pleasantly surprised. She told Xiaofan, swim around a few more times. We'll look for it. Chapter 343. Unfortunately, she didn't find any more spirit gathering stones. Mo Chenga thought about it and shook her head with a smile. Although spirit gathering stones weren't amazing treasures, they weren't something that could be found everywhere. It was already difficult to find one in such a small spirit stone vein. How many more did she want to find? She waved her hand to call Xiaofan back and said, let's keep going. Xiaofan responded and swam forward with her on its back. This spirit stone vein was really small. In just a moment they swam out of its range and entered a dark underground river. Mo Chenga was used to this kind of darkness, so she simply calmed down and silently comprehended her state of mind. According to the celestial pole, the difference between Tao cultivators and demonic cultivators was that Tao cultivators had to pay attention to the cultivation of their state of mind while improving their strength. Otherwise, they would be stuck at the bottleneck of a breakthrough. Demonic cultivators, on the other hand, didn't care about this. They only needed to absorb spiritual aura and turn it into devil aura. Therefore, the cultivation method of the demonic path was condemned by the righteous path as unorthodox. This had nothing to do with right or wrong. In fact, the demonic path was indeed more likely to be possessed by the devil than the righteous path. Because the cultivation of one's state of mind had to keep up with one's realm, the higher a cultivator's cultivation level was, the more restrictions there would be. For example, aura refining cultivators often did evil things, but when they reached the foundation building realm, they often began to cultivate their mind and nature because they had to overcome their inner demons in order to form their gold core. Core formation and nascent soul cultivators were even more restrained. If they didn't have a grudge or great benefits, they generally wouldn't kill. Mo Chenga didn't think this was abnormal before, but after she formed her gold core, she thought this matter was a bit strange. The law of the jungle was the rule of the cultivation world. But why did there have to be an inner demon when it came to realm advancement? This made cultivators suppress their murderous nature. Of course, not all cultivators followed this rule. Master Song Feng was one of those high-level cultivators who killed indiscriminately. However, her master also told her that the old man Song Feng was a monster who was neither human nor ghost nor monster. He couldn't be regarded as a normal person at all. Thinking up to this point made Mo Chenga confused again. She felt she seemed to have overlooked something, but she also felt that she had grasped a key point. She closed her eyes and immersed herself in the darkness, slowly recalling. Every day was a boring journey. In the end, even Xiaofan became impatient. In order to appease it, Mo Chenga gave it a medicinal pill every day. Every time it ate a medicinal pill, it would obediently continue on their journey. When it got greedy, it would refuse to leave and insist on eating more. Mo Chenga was actually happy to see Xiaofan like this. No matter how well-behaved Xiaofan was, she was still a child to the sea dragon. It was too depressing if she didn't have the temper of a child. Now that it had returned to its original nature, it meant that it was closer to him. One person and one beast walked, sometimes stopping, sometimes walking. Because of the existence of the virtual sky world, they didn't find it very difficult to pass through this underground river. Gradually time passed day by day. It seems to be getting hotter. Mo Chenga didn't use her water-repelling art. Instead, she stretched her hand into the river to explore it. Yifan still swam forward slowly and replied, "A little, but it doesn't matter, master, I'm not afraid of the heat." Although she said that, Mo Chenga didn't feel at ease. She didn't forget that this was a passage at the bottom of the volcano. Although the volcano had long stopped erupting, who knew if something would suddenly happen? After swimming forward for a while, she saw that the water was getting hotter and hotter. Mo Chenga reached in and found that it was much higher than her body temperature, which was really abnormal. They had been swimming in this underground river for a month, and the water had always been cold. Now that it suddenly became hot, there must be something strange. Xiaofan. Seeing that the water was steaming, Mo Chenga decisively shouted to stop it. "This water is unusual. Let's wait for a while." Yifan raised its head and said, "Master, do you think the water is too hot?" Mo Chenga frowned. "We're going through the passage at the bottom of the volcano. If there's lava in the depths, it'll be troublesome." Volcanic lava was a kind of earthly fire. If the grade of the lava was very high, it would be very troublesome to block the way. Although Mo Yaoqing had walked this path, it had been more than 5,000 years after all. She didn't know whether there would be any accidents. Yifan said, "Master, I'm not afraid of the heat. Let me explore the way." This. Mo Chenga hesitated. "What if there's danger? I'm already in the 5th rank, so I'm not afraid." Yifan said, "Master, don't treat me like a child who doesn't know anything. In the clan I'm also an uncle." "Oh." Hearing its serious tone, Mo Chenga thought it was right, so she smiled and said, "All right, go and have a look. If there's anything wrong, come back immediately or call me." And Yifan answered. When she floated in the air, it flicked its tail and went into the water. Mo Chenga looked at the place where it disappeared with a smile. Xiaohua and Feifei were very cute, but they couldn't talk. After having Yifan, she felt less lonely, as if she had someone to accompany her every day. She couldn't help but think of Qin Shi, who was already thousands of miles away. What was he doing? Was his cultivation going well? After a while, she heard the sound of water. Yifan finally came back. It came out of the water with a splash and said cheerfully, "Master, we're here." What's going on?" Yifan said happily, "I swam for a long time and found there was no way to go. Then I dived and found another waterway leading to a hot spring." Hot spring. Mo Chenga was happy. This road led to a hot spring. Did that mean they'd reached their destination? "Master, come on, let's go out." Yifan was more eager than her. Mo Chenga didn't delay and sat on its back. "Then let's go." One person and one beast couldn't wait. Yifan waved its fins and rushed into the water like an arrow leaving the bow. Sure enough, they didn't swim far. They reached the end of the waterway after walking for a month. Yifan had already explored the way, so it just dived into the water. After swimming in the water for a long time and making many turns, Mo Chenga almost couldn't tell the route. It finally began to float. The water was getting hotter and hotter, and Mo Chenga guessed there must be a volcano here that hadn't erupted for a long time. But she didn't know if there were any houses near this hot spring. There was some spiritual aura here, so there should be a small spirit vein outside. Maybe there were individual cultivators living here. While thinking about it, Lil Fan swam faster and faster and began to float up. Suddenly, a faint light appeared on top of its head, and then the light became brighter and brighter. A man and a beast emerged from the water with a splash. After walking in the underground waterway for a month, Mo Chenga hadn't seen the sun for a long time, so she couldn't help but narrow her eyes to block the light. Monster, monster. At this time she suddenly heard human voices, followed by chaotic footsteps and panicked screams. Mo Chenga's divine sense had long sensed the existence of these people, but they were all mortals, so she didn't care. Presumably they were frightened by Yifan's appearance. After adapting to the light, she put down her arms and quickly glanced around. This hot spring wasn't big, but it wasn't small either. It covered an area of several acres. Steam was rising from the water, and the surrounding was shaded by greenery. At first glance, she felt the scenery was excellent, as beautiful as a fairyland. Yifan, let's go up. She patted Yifan's head, brushed her sleeves, and gently floated ashore without getting wet. Although Yifan didn't want to leave the water, she obediently followed her. The noises on the shore became even more chaotic. Mo Chenga looked up and saw some married women wearing coarse clothes hurriedly running away, leaving behind clothes and clothes pestles all over the ground. She shook her head and ignored them. She thought the women here weren't any different from those in the celestial pole. Their clothes were also similar, but their accents were a bit different. With this thought in mind, she slowly walked out of the hot spring with Yifan. Some courtyard walls were exposed in a place a little further away from the hot spring, which seemed to belong to a big family in the secular world. Mo Chenga sensed that the place where the courtyard was located was the place with the densest spiritual aura in this spirit vein. She also sensed the breath of low-level cultivators inside. Could it be that this was a cultivation family in the secular world? She smiled and thought of an idea. She said to Yifan, "Yifan, there are a lot of people here. Why don't you go into the spiritual beast bag first?" Yifan had always been very obedient. Hearing her words, it obediently agreed and went back into the spiritual beast bag. After settling Yifan down, Mo Chenga restrained her spiritual aura pressure and walked a short distance away. Then she saw several well-dressed men walking towards her. They walked hurriedly as if they had something urgent to do. Judging from their clothes, they seemed to be the guards of a big family. When they came closer and saw her standing not far from the lake, they were surprised. Then the leader, who looked like a housekeeper, walked towards her with a group of men, stopped in front of her and respectfully said, "Greetings, fairy." She had restrained her spiritual aura, so these people were mortals with a little spiritual aura. They could only feel the rich spiritual aura on her body, but they couldn't distinguish her cultivation level. Mo Chenga nodded lightly. Seeing her graceful bearing and amiable attitude, the housekeeper didn't dare to be negligent and hurriedly asked, "We're from the Lu family. May I ask, fairy, are you passing by here?" Mo Chenga saw the man was very respectful, so she also answered politely, "I'm an individual cultivator from another place. I came here by chance and accidentally startled mortals." "What Lu family are you talking about? Is it a cultivation family here?" "Fairy, it turns out you're an individual cultivator from another place," the man said happily after getting the answer. "Our LV family is the largest cultivation family on South Pole Island. It's rare for a fellow cultivator to come here. My family's old master will be very happy if he knows. Fairy, would you like to be a guest of our LV family?" Hearing that this place was indeed called South Pole Island, Mo Chenga felt a little relieved. According to Yifan, South Pole Island was already within the scope of Yunzhong. So she finally arrived in Yunzhong smoothly. Her gaze fell on the LV family's housekeeper. This person was obviously a mortal, but he had spiritual aura. Although he hadn't reached the level of refining chi into spirit, he had already tempered his body with spiritual aura. Mo Chenga thought that Yunzhong was indeed a holy land for cultivators. Even these mortals in front of her were obviously cultivators. This was her first time in Yunzhong, so she needed to inquire about some information first. It would be good to go to this LV family to have a look. With this thought in mind, Mo Chenga said with a smile, "It's naturally good to have a fellow cultivator invite me. I'll accept your invitation then." Chapter 344. The Lu family's housekeeper called himself Luan. He carefully talked to Mo Chenga along the way and introduced the situation of the Lu family on South Pole Island to her. It turned out that there was a large island in the northeast of Yunzhong, separated by a shallow strait, which divided the island into two parts, the north and the south. The North Island was huge and there were several good spirit veins on it, so several small and medium-sized cultivation groups settled there. Moreover, Yunzhong was different from the celestial pole. There was no place they couldn't go. There were many people hunting sea beasts on the coast. Because there were spirit veins on the North Island, many sea beasts gathered nearby, so it was very lively. However, the South Island was only 1/10 the size of the North Island, and it only had a weak spirit vein. Small and medium-sized cultivation groups and large cultivation clans didn't care about it, so no one usually came here. The Lu family was neither strong nor weak, so they settled here. This island was said to be the northernmost place in Yunzhong, so it was called North Pole Island. Since it was divided into South and North Islands, the people of the South Island called their place South Pole Island. After listening to his explanation, Mo Chinga finally understood that South Pole didn't mean this island was the extreme south of Yunzhong. The name South Pole Island was only known by the Lu family and the residents here. Foreign cultivators generally went to the North Island and didn't know there was a South Island here. After Luan finished talking about the South Pole Island, he asked about Mo Chinga's origin. Mo Chinga said she was just an individual cultivator who traveled around because she didn't have the chance to advance. Because Yunzhong was huge and she knew some things about Yunzhong, Luan was just a housekeeper of a small cultivation clan, so she didn't think there was anything wrong with him. From Luan, Mo Chinga learned that the old master of the Lu family was an early-stage foundation-building cultivator who was more than 200 years old. In addition, there were several talented juniors in the family. All members of the Lu family practiced immortal spells, and there were quite a few aura-refining cultivators among them. However, they, the housekeepers and guards, were only nobodies in the Lu family. They were all mortals, and up until now, they were only able to temper their bodies with spiritual aura. Mo Chinga also knew that mortals couldn't cultivate to become immortals. They didn't have spiritual roots and couldn't retain spiritual aura. With hard work and medicinal pills, they could reach the first layer of the aura-refining realm at most and could only use some simple immortal spells without disasters or diseases. However, those who could cultivate to the first layer of Qi training were few and far between. Most people couldn't even reach this realm and were unable to cast off their mortal bodies. Through Luan's words, Mo Chinga could see that cultivation was indeed very popular in Yunzhong. As long as a family had some money, there wasn't a single person who didn't cultivate. Because they couldn't see through her cultivation level, they cautiously asked her whether she was a foundation-building cultivator or not. She didn't want to make it public, so she acquiesced. These people were very happy to see this and asked many questions about cultivation along the way. Since these mortals were so fanatical about cultivation, Mo Chinga gave them a few pointers. Her explanation was simple and easy to understand, but it also hit the nail on the head. These people were suddenly enlightened and were extremely grateful to her. Not long after, they arrived at the Lu family's mansion. Luan personally led her into the courtyard and reported to the chief steward. The chief steward was a low-level cultivator with spiritual roots. At first he was indifferent to Luan, but once he saw Mo Chinga, his attitude immediately changed. He respectfully invited her into the reception hall and gave her a grand reception. He then ordered someone to quickly report to the old master. At that moment, Mo Chinga restrained her spiritual breath and pretended to be in the late stage of the foundation-building realm. She learned from Luan that although the cultivation level of Yunzhong was higher than that of the celestial pole, there weren't many high-level cultivators. There were very few core formation and nascent soul cultivators in the outside world, so the late stage of the foundation-building realm wouldn't attract too much attention. Moreover, their cultivation levels could be considered high, so she could avoid some unnecessary trouble. The old master of Lu family's divine sense had long sensed the arrival of a foundation-building cultivator. Just as the chief steward was about to send someone to invite her, the old master of Lu family came out of the backyard. Although this person was called the old master, he looked to be about 40 years old. He was well-dressed and had a radiant complexion. Obviously he was good at taking care of himself. As soon as he saw Mo Chinga, he was startled. When he regained his composure, his attitude became even more polite. He came forward to greet Mo Chinga. "Fellow Taoist, I'm Lu Qingdong. Fellow Taoist, you've come to visit my Lu family. I'm sorry I didn't go out to greet you." Mo Chinga returned his greeting, neither too enthusiastic nor too cold. She smiled and said, "So you're fellow Taoist Lu. My surname is Mo, and my given name is Qingwei. I'm an individual cultivator. I accidentally came here to travel and happened to run into your family, so I came to your mansion to disturb you. Please forgive me. You're too kind." Seeing that Mo Chinga was polite and wasn't the kind of cultivator who looked down on low-level cultivators just because her cultivation level was high, the old master of Lu family, Lu Qingdong, was delighted and even more enthusiastic. "We're both cultivators of the righteous path. Meeting each other is fate. Fellow Taoist Mo, you're too polite. Please take a seat." The two of them greeted each other and sat down as host and guest. Lu Qingdong ordered them to serve good tea and treated them very enthusiastically. After drinking the tea, Lu Qingdong carefully sized up Mo Chinga. He was quite surprised at her young age. It wasn't easy for individual cultivators to cultivate. Those who could build their foundation were rare, and those who could cultivate to the late stage of the foundation-building realm were even rarer. Mo Chinga, who looked to be in her 20s, had an extraordinary bearing, and had such a high cultivation level, so she looked like a disciple of a big cultivation group. With that thought in mind, Lu Qingdong put on a smile and said politely, "Fellow Taoist Mo, you're so graceful and your cultivation level is so high, but you're actually just an individual cultivator. I really admire you." How could Mo Chenga not understand his probing intention? She just smiled and said, "Fellow Taoist Lu, you're too polite. I'm only able to cultivate to this realm thanks to my elder. When I first entered the path of immortality, I had an elder by my side to look after me. If it weren't for that elder, I'm afraid I'd still be lingering in the aura refining realm." Upon hearing what she said, a hint of understanding flashed in Lu Qingdong's eyes. He then smiled and said, "I see. However, since fellow Taoist Mo can cultivate to the late stage of the foundation building realm, your talent is obviously extraordinary. It really makes a mediocre person like me envious." "Not at all. I was just lucky." Mo Chenga still smiled, without the slightest trace of pride on her face. Seeing this, Lu Qingdong thought even more highly of her. He asked again, "May I know where fellow Taoist Mo cultivated before? Did you come to South Pole Island for something important? Although my Lu clan isn't a big cultivation clan, we've been here for hundreds of years. Maybe we can help you." "Fellow Taoist Lu, you're too polite." Mo Chenga smiled and said, "To be honest, ever since I set foot on the path of immortality, I've been wandering around with that elder. Later, that elder passed away and I traveled around by myself without a fixed residence. This time I came to South Pole Island because I accidentally intruded and startled your clan. I'm really sorry." "Fellow Taoist Mo, you're too polite. What's so important about this?" Lu Qingdong paused and said with a smile, "In that case, fellow Taoist and our Lu clan are fated. Although our South Pole Island and North Pole Island are connected, few cultivators come and go. It's rare for a fellow Taoist to come, so as the host, I must entertain you well." Then Lu Qingdong started chatting with her with great enthusiasm. Mo Chenga knew why LV Qingdong was so enthusiastic towards her. The difference between the early stage and the late stage of the foundation building realm wasn't small. Since this Lu clan was only a small cultivation clan, Lu Qingdong probably didn't meet many late-stage foundation building cultivators, so he naturally had to make friends with her and take the opportunity to talk about cultivation. Mo Chenga thought that although her cultivation technique was different from ordinary people's, they were all cultivators, so there must be similarities. Giving pointers to an early-stage foundation building cultivator wouldn't be a problem for her, so she calmly accepted Lu Qingdong's hospitality. The two of them talked for a long time and discussed the path of cultivation. Soon after, Lu Qingdong ordered the Lu clan's children to come and greet her. Mo Chenga met them one by one and found several of them had good spiritual roots, so she praised them, making Lu Qingdong feel very proud. Among the Lu clan's children, there was a little girl who was said to be just 18 years old and already in the 7th layer of the aura refining realm. She was Lu Qingdong's most beautiful granddaughter. When Mo Chenga heard Lu Qingdong's complacent tone when he introduced this granddaughter, she knew this little girl was very favored, so she praised her. "Your granddaughter has such a high cultivation level at such a young age. Her future will definitely be bright." Although her words were polite, they weren't nonsense. Back then, she was already in the 7th layer of the aura refining realm at the age of 17, which was given to her by second uncle using Yi clan's savings. The highest cultivation level in the Lu clan was only in the early stage of the foundation building realm, so they couldn't compare to the Yi clan at all. However, this little girl's cultivation level wasn't worse than hers back then, so her aptitude was quite good. Hearing her praise, Lu Qingdong smiled crookedly and said, "You flatter me, fellow Taoist Mo, you're too polite." Lu Qionying, the little girl from the Lu clan, wasn't afraid at all. She stared at Mo Chenga for a long time and said with a smile, "Senior is so young. You look like an elder sister." Lu Qingdong hastily scolded her. "Don't talk nonsense. Senior's cultivation level is profound, but she looks young. How can you be so rude?" Mo Chenga understood what Lu Qingdong was implying. Although she looked young, her real age was hard to tell. She wasn't the kind of woman who cared about age and appearance, so she just smiled and didn't feel unhappy. Lu Qionying pouted and said, "Grandpa, you don't understand. I said Senior looks like an elder sister because Senior is young and beautiful. Calling you Senior sounds like you're old. Calling you elder sister is better." "This child?" Mo Chenga smiled and said, "Fellow Taoist Lu, you don't have to blame your granddaughter. She praised me for being young and beautiful, so how could I not be happy?" Lu Qingdong glared at Lu Qionying, expressed his apology and said, This child has been spoiled since she was a child. Although her words aren't very respectful, her heart is good. Emo Chenga saw the faint complacency on his face and felt it was funny in her heart. Although Lu family's patriarch apologized on behalf of his granddaughter, in his heart, he thought his granddaughter was very good. Soon after, the Lu family held a banquet. After eating and drinking, they talked about a lot of cultivation matters. In the end, they invited Emo Chenga to stay in the Lu family for a few days. Emo Chenga wanted to inquire about Yunzhong from the Lu family, so she agreed. Lu Qiangying, the little girl from the Lu family, was instructed by Lu Qingdong to stay with Emo Chenga. Emo Chenga was clear about Lu Qingdong's plan. In the cultivation world, although the gender of cultivators wasn't very important, there were still differences. It was easier for female cultivators to communicate with each other than male cultivators. He asked his granddaughter to stay with Emo Chenga because he hoped the two of them could get closer so he could give his granddaughter some pointers. Giving pointers to a little girl in the aura refining realm was a piece of cake for her. Moreover, Lu Qiangying was smart, but she was just a little girl, so it would be easier to get some information from her, so she was very happy. After the banquet, both the host and the guest enjoyed themselves, so Emo Chenga went to the guest house accompanied by Lu Qiangying. Chapter 345. Senior Emo, how old are you in the end? Lu Qiangying, the little girl from the Lu family, suddenly asked. Emo Chenga sat cross-legged to adjust her breath. Emo Chenga opened her eyes and smiled faintly. Why do you ask? Lu Qiangying tilted her head and looked confused. I think Senior looks young and doesn't look like it's because of look-preserving pills, but Grandpa said you're already in the late stage of the foundation-building realm. Maybe you're even older than him. This little girl? How could she say something like that? Was she naive? Emo Chenga glanced at her and said, You have good eyesight. You can tell whether people have taken look-preserving pills or not. Lu Qiangying touched her head embarrassedly. Senior, please don't be offended. When I see my grandaunts, I always feel that although they look young, their actions are unnatural. But Senior can't see it at all. Of course. Although Emo Chenga also took look-preserving pills, she was only 100 years old, which was considered young according to the lifespan of core formation cultivators. But she just smiled and said, I've also taken look-preserving pills. I'm over 100 years old now, but my lifespan is less than half, so you can't see it. Oh, I see. Lu Qiangying lost interest, but she turned her gaze and asked excitedly, Senior, have you been to a lot of places? Have you seen anything interesting? This question made Emo Chenga pause. She thought for a moment, then said, When I was young, I wandered around with my uncle. Although I've been to a lot of places, my cultivation level was still low at that time. Every day, I just wanted to earn enough spirit stones to cultivate. How could there be anything interesting? If I could cultivate in peace and have enough spirit stones to buy medicinal pills to eat, I'd be satisfied. Lu Qiangying blinked. So Senior used to have such a hard life. It's not hard at all. My uncle is a foundation-building cultivator, so it's already good that we have a place to live. It's also not easy for many young cultivators to rent an immortal's cave with spiritual aura. At this point, she recalled the many injustices she saw with second uncle in those years and couldn't help but sigh. It's not easy to be an individual cultivator. It had been a long time since she thought about these past events. Now that her cultivation level was high and her identity was extraordinary, she was no longer the little cultivator who struggled at the bottom of the cultivation world. Now that she thought about it, she missed second uncle even more. How good would it be if second uncle could see this day? She pulled herself back from her memories and glanced at the little girl. She suddenly smiled and slowly said, I know why your grandfather sent you here. You're just a little girl who hasn't experienced the ways of the world. It's too difficult for you to do such a thing. Forget it, I'll tell you the truth. If I wanted to harm your Lu family, I wouldn't need to feign civility with my cultivation. Of course, I do have my own motives for befriending you. Since I've made things clear, I might as well be frank with you. Although her eyes were calm, there was a hidden sharpness in them. Lu Qiangying was shocked. The reason her grandfather called her here was indeed because he wanted to test whether this Senior Emo had other motives. If she didn't, he wanted to take this opportunity to get her to give him a few pointers. If she was suspicious, the Lu family could make preparations early. Ever since she was a child, she had always been smart and quick-witted. She had always been pampered at home, so she thought she could easily deceive this senior if she pretended to be innocent. However, she didn't expect that she was only 18 years old. How could she compare to this senior who had lived for more than 100 years? At this moment, she was faintly regretting her decision. If this senior really had bad intentions, How could she keep her life when she was only in the 7th layer of the aura refining realm? Senior? Emo Chenga showed a faint smile. She was still as amiable as before. You don't need to be afraid. I don't want anything from your Lu family. I just want to ask some questions. If you answer them well, I'll leave. Senior. LV Cheongying was a bit anxious. Grandfather told her that as long as this senior didn't have bad intentions, she must win her over. After all, it was rare for them to meet a late-stage foundation-building cultivator. Emo Chenga remained unmoved. She raised her hand to stop LV Cheongying from speaking and said, "Answer me well. If you're satisfied, I'll give you some benefits." LV Cheongying hastily swallowed the rest of her words. Although she was anxious, she knew she couldn't afford to offend this senior. Moreover, she also promised to give her some benefits. What does senior want to ask? Junior will definitely tell you everything I know. At this time, LV Cheongying's attitude was very respectful. She no longer talked like a naive little girl and now behaved like a cultivator. Emo Chenga thought her current appearance was more pleasing to the eye, so she smiled and said gently, "First, tell me about the general situation in Yunzhong." A strange expression flashed across LV Cheongying's eyes. She obviously didn't understand what was going on, but she still said honestly, "May I know what Senior Emo wants to know?" Cultivation Group, Spirit Veins, Country. "I've already told you everything," Emo Chenga said faintly. "Tell me everything you know. The more you tell me, the more I'll reward you." As she spoke, she put her hand into her Qingquan bag, took out a jade bottle, and threw it to LV Cheongying. LV Cheongying caught it and opened it. It was a whole bottle of aura-converging pills, about 30 to 50 of them. She was overjoyed. Even though she was a very favored junior of the LV family, she usually ate aura-converging pills and only got a small bottle of aura-converging pills every year, about 5 or 6 of them. The senior Emo is actually so generous. Thinking up to this point, she became even more respectful. Yes. LV Cheongying was also a smart girl. After hearing Emo Chenga's words, she guessed this senior probably wasn't from Yunzhong, so she carefully began to talk about Yunzhong's territory and then slowly talked about cultivation groups and so on. Emo Chenga just listened quietly. Yunzhong was vast and had many countries. However, there were only 3 big countries, Eastern Tang, Southern Zhou and Northern Lin. These 3 countries occupied most of Yunzhong's land. Different from the Celestial Pole, these 3 countries were supported by cultivation groups. Eastern Tang and Southern Zhou were the territories of the Righteous Path, while Northern Lin was the territory of the Devil Path. Usually, these 3 countries lived in harmony. After all, Yunzhong didn't have the concept that the Righteous Path and the Devil Path couldn't coexist. Whether it was the Righteous Path or the Devil Path, they all lived by the principle of self-preservation. They wouldn't fight unless there was a conflict of interest. Eastern Tang was mainly populated by cultivators and was also the largest country among the 3 countries. There were countless small and medium-sized cultivation groups, and there were 5 that could be considered big cultivation groups: Juyin Sect, Danxia Sect, Jingshu Sect, Common Law School and 5 Elements Valley. Among these 5 big cultivation groups, Juyin Sect was the most powerful. It was said that under the sect's founder, there were 9 disciples. These 9 disciples were very outstanding, so they established the sect together and honored their master as the founder of the sect, hence the name Juyin Sect. Danxia Sect was originally second only to Juyin Sect and was also a big cultivation group. However, in recent years, it had declined. Among the 5 cultivation groups, it was only slightly stronger than 5 Elements Valley. Jingshu Sect and Common Law School were equal in power. Among them, because the founder of Jingshu Sect was a woman, most of its disciples were female. As for 5 Elements Valley, it was a cultivation group that specialized in formations. It was said that all of its disciples had extraordinary attainments in formations. However, this kind of cultivation group that focused on unorthodox methods was never prosperous, so 5 Elements Valley was the weakest among the 5 big cultivation groups. However, even so, the other cultivation groups didn't dare to bully them at all. After all, the biggest barrier of each cultivation group was the Great Mountain Protecting Formation. If they offended 5 Elements Valley, it would be troublesome when they fought. In Southern Zhou, Confucian cultivators controlled the government and Buddhist cultivators controlled the state religion. Most of the common people in Southern Zhou believed in Buddhism, so there were Buddhist temples everywhere and incense was flourishing. Confucian cultivators, on the other hand, controlled the power of the country and used academies to educate the subjects and people. Because Confucian cultivators and Buddhist cultivators sought different things, their doctrines were similar, so the two were very harmonious. Although she knew there were Buddhist cultivators in other places, she had never seen them in the celestial pole, so she couldn't help but ask a few more questions. Unfortunately, Lu Qiangying had never traveled outside, and South Pole Island was far away from the mainland, so she didn't know much about Buddhist cultivation groups. However, no matter how much Lu Qiangying didn't know, Buddhist cultivators were common in Yunzhong, so she had a general idea. The so-called Buddha was said to be a sect that had been passed down from ancient times. They paid attention to cause and effect, strictly disciplined themselves, and believed that all evil thoughts were born from the heart. They cut off human desires and cultivated hard to become Buddhas. This made Mo Chenga feel a little strange. She naturally understood the so-called cause and effect. There was also such content in the Tao scriptures of cultivators, but they weren't as cautious as Buddhist cultivators. The cultivation path of Buddhist cultivators was nothing more than 3 sentences. All actions are impermanent, all laws are non-self, and nirvana is silent. The so-called impermanence of all actions meant that everything in the world was impermanent. All laws are non-self, which required Buddhist cultivators to let go of their obsessions and find their true self. Nirvana is the final destination pursued by Buddhist cultivators, which was neither born nor destroyed to prove eternal life. Mo Chenga slowly comprehended in her heart. She deeply felt that the so-called Buddhist cultivators were actually similar to Tao cultivators. For example, cause and effect, the impermanence of the world, and abandoning obsessions. But on the other hand, the doctrines of Buddhist cultivators were very different from those of Tao cultivators. The Tao scriptures said that heaven and earth were heartless and treated all living things as straw dogs. In other words, heaven and earth didn't care about benevolence or inhumanity. All living things lived and died on their own, and they had their own laws. Therefore, cultivators in the celestial pole never had the concept of benevolence. Cultivation was a road full of thorns. If they wanted to become true immortals, they had to kill their way out. They had to kill devil cultivators, demonic beasts, and even their own kind. According to Lu Qiangying, cultivators in Yunzhong weren't different from cultivators in the celestial pole. But Buddhist cultivators weren't like that. They cultivated their minds and themselves and rarely had killing intent. They would only stop killing with killing if they had no other choice. Therefore, in Yunzhong, Buddhist cultivators were rarely trapped in their state of mind. It had always been easier for them to advance to the core formation and nascent soul realms than Tao cultivators. But their shortcoming was that their cultivation speed was too slow. If one could become a foundation-building cultivator out of 100 aura refining cultivators, one could only become a foundation-building cultivator out of 100 aura refining cultivators. After listening to this, Mo Chenga sank into contemplation. She felt she seemed to have grasped a key point. Whether it was Tao cultivators or Buddhist cultivators, there were contradictions in their doctrines. However, Buddhist cultivators had fewer doctrines because they could at least justify themselves. Tao cultivators, on the other hand, simply didn't make sense in some aspects. Cultivation was to cultivate the mind. This was something cultivators knew from the moment they set foot on the path to immortality, but why were they like demonic beasts, full of bloody killing intent? Chapter 346. After asking about everything she was interested in, Mo Chenga smiled and said, "This bottle of medicinal pills is my reward for you. Tell your grandfather that I'll take my leave now." Then she stood up, pushed the door open and left. "Senior." Lu Qiangying chased after her, but when she stepped out of the door, she couldn't see Mo Chenga anymore. She was stunned for a while and sighed in distress. She messed up what her grandfather told her to do. However, when she thought of that bottle of medicinal pills, she became happy again. In any case, she made a lot of money. Mo Chenga restrained her breath and flew to North Pole Island according to Lu Qiangying's instructions. She originally planned to stay in the Lu family for a while and learn more about the cultivation world in Yunzhong from Lu Qingdong, but she didn't expect them to be so cautious and suspicious, which made her feel very troublesome. But it didn't matter. When she went to North Pole Island, she could naturally inquire about it slowly. South Pole Island was really small. After flying for a while, Mo Chenga saw the strait the Lu family mentioned. Although it was called a strait, it was actually only 1 kilometer away. Even an aura refining cultivator could easily cross it with talismans. However, the spirit veins on this 2-kilometer away were like heaven and earth. Before she even arrived at North Pole Island, Mo Chenga already sensed that there were at least 3 to 5 fairly good spirit veins on this big island. They were even better than the ones on Mount Yunwu back then. In comparison, South Pole Island was nothing more than a small hill with some spiritual aura. No wonder the Lu family could monopolize South Pole Island even though the highest cultivation level was only in the early stage of the foundation building realm. In fact, the spirit veins on North Pole Island weren't worth mentioning at all. After flying over the strait, she saw a bustling town on North Pole Island. Cultivators were everywhere, and foundation building cultivators weren't rare either. She landed at the town gate and was looking around when she suddenly heard an enthusiastic voice. Senior, are you here for the first time on North Pole Island? Mo Chenga didn't pay attention to it, but when the person turned around and repeated himself, she realized he was talking to her. The person talking to her was a teenager who seemed to be only 16 or 17 years old. Although he had a little spiritual aura, he hadn't reached the first layer of the aura refining realm. At first glance, she could tell he was a mortal who mingled in the streets. She glanced at the young man and asked faintly, "What's the matter?" The teenager immediately revealed a smile and said respectfully, "Senior, you look like a foundation building expert at first glance. May I ask if this is your first time coming to North Pole Island?" "Not bad." Mo Chenga cast a sidelong glance at the youngster. She saw that he was dressed in short clothes and was bare-chested. He didn't look like he wanted to sell her things, but he had an attentive smile on his face. No matter how she looked at it, he looked like he was trying to solicit business. "In that case, Senior, did you come to North Pole Island to visit friends or to hunt beasts?" Upon hearing what he said, Mo Chenga narrowed her eyes and stared at him. Upon seeing Mo Chenga's meaningful glance, the youngster hastily explained, "Senior, please don't misunderstand. I'm a broker. I'm in this bazaar all year round. When I come across cultivators who come to our North Pole Island for the first time, I'll solicit some business to make a living." "Oh, I see." Mo Chenga withdrew her hostile gaze and asked, "Then what kind of business do you want to solicit?" Seeing that she was interested, the young man's face lit up and he explained enthusiastically, "That depends on what Senior is here for. I'm not boasting, but I grew up on North Pole Island, so there's nothing I don't know about the island." This youngster was indeed confident. Mo Chenga smiled and asked, "If I came to visit a friend, what would you do? If I came to hunt beasts, what would you do?" The youngster answered with a smile, "If Senior came to visit a friend, then as long as Senior can tell me your friend's name and cultivation level, I'll have a way to ask someone to look for them. If Senior came to hunt beasts, then I can find a suitable place for Senior to stay and introduce you to other cultivators who come to hunt beasts with you. In addition, I also have a map of North Pole Island, which clearly shows which demonic beasts can be found. I can also introduce Senior to merchants who accept beast cores. I guarantee they're big merchants who offer fair prices." Mo Chenga was slightly surprised. "You're not a cultivator, how could you know big merchants who accept beast cores?" The youngster scratched his head in embarrassment and said, "To be honest, I don't have any other skills, but I'm very slippery. If I can make those shopkeepers happy, they'll be willing to give me a small profit. Besides, I often introduce some business to them. Although I don't earn much, it's still a source of income." After listening to what he said, Mo Chenga thought for a moment then said, "It's my first time here, so I need a place to stay. Can you introduce it to me?" The youngster was overjoyed and said enthusiastically, "I wonder what Senior wants? Do you want a place with rich spiritual aura or an ordinary one? How big is the place? Do you want an immortal's cave or a residence? How long do you want to stay?" Mo Chenga said, "It's fine as long as the spiritual aura is enough. It doesn't matter if it's an immortal's cave or a residence. There's also no requirement for the size of the place. I just want it to be a bit quiet. As for how long, I can't say for sure. Maybe a few days, maybe a month." "I see." The youngster lowered his head and thought for a while then said, "Senior, the length of your stay is uncertain, so it's not suitable for you to rent an immortal's cave. There's no requirement for the spiritual aura or the size of the place, so an inn sounds more suitable. I know several inns with independent courtyards, which are specially provided for senior experts like you to stay in. The spiritual aura is good, and there'll be people to serve you at all times, so it'll be absolutely quiet." At this point, the youngster smiled apologetically. "But the price might be a bit expensive." "What price?" "1 spirit stone a day is about right." The youngster emphasized, "This price is still a bit cheaper than renting a good immortal's cave." Mo Chenga smiled then asked, "Then what about your commission?" Upon hearing this question, the youngster rubbed his hands embarrassedly and said, "Senior, just give me some running expenses." Mo Chenga smiled. She knew these brokers could get hard-earned money from merchants if they made a deal, so she didn't ask much about running expenses. She also didn't want to attract attention, so she said, 1 spirit stone a day is passable. You just need to find an ordinary one." "Yes." The youngster looked at her and asked, Senior, will you follow me to take a look? After discussing with the youngster, Emo Chenga followed him through the streets and alleys. Before long they arrived at the entrance of an inn. This inn was located on a street that wasn't very lively. It was neither new nor old, and there weren't too many people or too few people, which just happened to meet her ordinary requirements. Senior, please come in. The youngster took the lead. As soon as he entered the inn he shouted, "Shopkeeper Dong, Shopkeeper Dong." Upon hearing his voice, a stout middle-aged man came out from behind the counter. He didn't have any spiritual aura on his body, he was a complete mortal. He patted the dust on his hands and glanced at the youngster. "Oh, isn't this a small table? What's wrong? Are you here to get your commission from last time? I'm telling you that customer is too hard to serve. She didn't pay me much and she even made my staff run around everywhere. Here, this is all I have. Don't think it's too little. If it weren't for our old friendship, I wouldn't have given you any." The shopkeeper took out a small piece of silver from the drawer and handed it to the youngster. The youngster, who was called a small table, took it and said with a smile, "How could I think it's too little? What kind of friendship do we have? Do you think I, a small table, am a mercenary who can't distinguish right from wrong? But this time it's different. This time I brought a distinguished guest with me." Shopkeeper Dong absent-mindedly raised his head and cast a glance at Emo Chenga standing behind him. He was startled and hastily walked out from behind the counter. He said respectfully, "Fairy, are you here to stay?" Emo Chenga didn't answer and just stared at the small table. The small table said, "This senior is an expert in the foundation building realm. She wants to find a quiet place to stay temporarily. Don't you have several small courtyards? Do you still have them?" Yes. Shopkeeper Dong said with a smile. "Fairy, how many days do you want to stay? We still have 3 small courtyards left. One is full of spiritual aura while the other 2 are ordinary. Apart from other things, there's no need to talk about how quiet they are." Facing their eager gazes, Emo Chenga smiled and said, "Then let's go take a look." Yes. The shopkeeper said to the waiter and personally led the 2 of them to look at the courtyards. Outside the inn's back door was actually a small hill. As the shopkeeper led the way he rambled on and on. "Fairy, of the 3 small courtyards we have left, the ones with abundant spiritual aura are a bit further away, and the ones with ordinary spiritual aura are not far behind us. The best one is naturally the one with abundant spiritual aura. It's far away, there are people to serve you, and the layout is also elegant. The other 2 aren't bad, but the spiritual aura is a bit lacking." As he spoke, Emo Chenga saw the 2 courtyards with ordinary spiritual aura he mentioned. They were built in 2 rows in the valley. Each courtyard was about 300 meters apart, and many trees were planted in the middle. She used her divine sense to examine the 2 rows of courtyards. There were 5 or 6 cultivators' breaths in them. After thinking for a while she said, "What else?" Seeing that she wasn't satisfied with the courtyards in front of her, Shopkeeper Dong became more attentive. He made an inviting gesture and said, "There's another one in the depths. Fairy, please." Although this valley was small, the spirit vein was pretty good. It wasn't inferior to the one in the South Pole Island's Lu clan. Apparently, behind this inn was a cultivation clan or something similar. The deeper they went, the denser the spiritual aura became. After walking for about half a mile, they saw 2 more courtyards where the spiritual aura was the densest. "Fairy, please take a look." Shopkeeper Dong pointed at the 2 courtyards hidden in the forest. "This is the place with the densest spiritual aura in this small spirit vein. We only built 2 courtyards far away from each other so we won't be disturbed." Emo Chenga looked around. There was a small forest between the 2 courtyards. If they didn't intentionally offend them, there shouldn't be any problems. She pondered for a while and made up her mind. She asked, "Which courtyard is empty?" Shopkeeper Dong pointed at the one slightly outside and said, "It's that one. The one inside is also occupied by a fairy, but most of the time she's not there." Emo Chenga nodded. That was the best way. She wouldn't be disturbed. After walking in the sewer for a month, she now wanted to find a place to rest. Shopkeeper Dong led her into the small courtyard in the forest. There was a mortal woman cleaning the courtyard. He called out loudly, "Ian." The woman turned around. When she saw the shopkeeper coming in with a guest, she hastily bowed to greet him. Shopkeeper Dong said, "Fairy, please take a look. There are 3 rooms here. This room can be used for concocting medicinal pills, this room can be used for cultivating, and the small hall in the middle can be used for receiving guests. In addition, if you have any spiritual beasts, you can raise them here." If there's anything you need, you can just tell Ayan to do it. If there's nothing, she'll stay in the small side room and absolutely won't disturb you. Emo Chinga looked around and was very satisfied. Although this courtyard was small, it was elegantly decorated. Everything needed was here. It wouldn't matter even if she lived here for a year or a half. Fairy, are you satisfied? It's settled? Emo Chinga asked. What's the price? 1 spirit stone a day, shopkeeper Dong said with a smile. Rest assured, this price is absolutely fair. Emo Chinga nodded. She took out a handful of spirit stones from her Chingkuan bag and handed them to the shopkeeper. I'll stay here for about 10 days. If I'm still here, I'll come back to collect the money. Yes. Shopkeeper Dong nodded and bowed. Then I won't disturb you anymore. Little Desk, who had been following behind them, looked at the dozen or so spirit stones and smiled. There were so many spirit stones, so at least one of them was his commission. He stepped forward and said, Senior, I'll also take my leave first. Emo Chinga nodded with a smile. She then touched her Chingkuan bag and gave him a spirit stone. Consider this money for your hard work. Little Desk's eyes brightened and he repeatedly expressed his gratitude. Thank you for your reward, Senior. Chapter 347. After shopkeeper Dong and the small table left, Emo Chinga dismissed the maid, arranged her own formation in the cultivation room, and entered the virtual sky world to rest. She told the maid Ayan that she wanted to rest for 3 to 5 days and not to disturb her if there was nothing important. The maid was used to serving cultivators and knew the rules very well. Needless to say, she said she would only clean the courtyard and would never enter the house. Emo Chinga was very satisfied. The mortals on North Pole Island were very sensible. Perhaps it was because the people in Yunzhong had long been used to living with cultivators, so they had a good understanding of their habits. In the next few days, Emo Chinga didn't do anything important. She just adjusted her breath, played with the spiritual beasts, and read Emo Yaoqing's cultivation notes. Half a month passed. Shopkeeper Dong came once and she paid him dozens of spirit stones, saying she wanted to stay for a while. Shopkeeper Dong was very happy to see her paying so readily. He told her a lot about North Pole Island and told her that if she needed anything she could directly tell Ayan to call him. All the guests living here didn't need to pay extra for inquiring about information or buying things for her. Emo Chinga thanked him and asked him for a map without any politeness. On the map, North Pole Island was carefully marked with various spirit veins and the distribution of demonic beasts. Unfortunately, other places only had a rough outline. Yunzhong continent only had the distribution of the 3 big countries, and the locations of some cultivation groups weren't marked at all. In addition, Emo Chinga noticed that North Pole Island was quite far from Yunzhong continent. If she flew, it might take a long time, so she asked the maid how many ways to go to Yunzhong. The maid Ayan told her that there were several places on North Pole Island with transporting formations, which were very convenient to leave. Emo Chinga was relieved. It seemed the formation masters in Yunzhong were quite powerful. Transporting formations were the most complicated kind of formations, requiring very complicated skills and countless spirit stones. There weren't many transporting formations in the celestial pole, and even if there were, they were short distance and were controlled by big cultivation groups. Yunzhong, on the other hand, was just a small North Pole island, but it unexpectedly had several transporting formations. If she wanted to use transporting formations, she only needed to pay spirit stones. After resting for several days and recovering her energy, Emo Chinga finally left the small courtyard where she temporarily lived and went to the town. The maid Ayan said the bazaar on North Pole Island was famous in Yunzhong. Even core formation cultivators would come here to buy things. Emo Chinga was rather surprised to hear that. Quanzhong City, the most prosperous place for individual cultivators in the celestial pole, wasn't much. North Pole Island was just a small island in the northernmost part of Yunzhong. It was far less prosperous than Yunzhong itself. Fairy, this is our busiest street. On this street you can buy anything you want, especially monster cores. As long as you can't think of it, there's nothing you can't buy. Ayan walked in front, proudly introducing the street to her. Emo Chinga originally planned to stroll around by herself, but Ayan said she was very familiar with the bazaar on North Pole Island, so after some thought, Emo Chinga decided to take Ayan with her. Is that really the case? Emo Chinga simply smiled at Ayan's question and asked. Of course she knew this was an exaggeration, but since Ayan dared to say this bazaar should have something worthy of praise. Of course. Ayan said, reportedly tens of thousands of years ago, our North Pole Island was still very desolate. Later, a cultivator came here and discovered spirit veins, so it gradually became lively. In the beginning, only some cultivation clans and small cultivation groups established themselves here. Later, other people discovered that there were a lot of sea beasts here, so they came here to hunt beasts. Gradually, today's North Pole Island came into being. I see. That's not all. Ian said with a smile. Originally, when these cultivators hunted sea beasts, they would sell them inland. But because more and more people came to hunt beasts, many merchants simply set up branches here, specializing in collecting sea beasts' cores. Gradually, North Pole Island became the largest demonic beast core market in all of Yunzhong. Even the cores of land demonic beasts were sold here. It could be said that if you can't find a monster core on North Pole Island, it'll be very difficult to find one in all of Yunzhong. Is that so? Such a small island was unexpectedly the largest demonic beast core market in Yunzhong. If that was the case, she could see what rare demonic beast cores were and buy any suitable ones. As soon as she walked into this so-called monster core street, she immediately heard one call after another. Fellow Taoist, do you want to buy a monster core? I have a high-grade sea beast core here. If it's damaged, I'll compensate you double the price. Seniors, our humble shop has a new batch of monster cores. They've just arrived from inland and each one is guaranteed to be of high quality. First come, first served. We'll only sell them out. 1 5th rank cloud-splitting beast's core, starting from 1,000 spirit stones. If you're interested, please come inside and discuss in detail. Emo Chenga clicked her tongue in wonder. Market squares in the celestial pole were rarely this lively. Even if cultivators did business, they wouldn't hawk their wares like mortals. Most of them just quietly set up their stalls and waited for customers to come. In Yunzhong, however, it wasn't like this. Cultivators also hawked their wares and solicited customers like mortals. Perhaps it was because mortals in Yunzhong also cultivated? Therefore, in Yunzhong, there wasn't a huge difference between cultivators and mortals like in the celestial pole. Just as she was thinking, someone approached her. Fellow Taoist, are you interested in a 4th-rank thundercloud treading on snow beast's core? Emo Chenga waved her hand at the cultivator who solicited business, indicating she wasn't interested. She then continued to stroll on the street with Ian. The person who spoke to her was a foundation-building cultivator. In the celestial pole, how could a foundation-building cultivator do business like this? He probably wouldn't even be willing to set up a stall. Sure enough, the customs in Yunzhong were greatly different from those in the celestial pole. Fairy, are you just going to look around? You don't have anything you want? Ian asked eagerly. Emo Chenga glanced at her then asked with a smile, do you have any shops to recommend? Ian twisted the handkerchief in her hand embarrassedly and said, our boss also has a shop here. If you recommend customers there, you can give them a 10% discount. I also get a commission. From her first experience on North Pole Island as well as what she saw and heard during this time, Emo Chenga already knew that this was the customs in Yunzhong. Their business was much more prosperous than in the celestial pole, so she just smiled. Seeing that Emo Chenga wasn't interested, Ian didn't say much and started to introduce the shop in front of her. Fairy, please take a look. This Jade Qilin Pavilion is the shop of Tianyan Sect, the largest cultivation group on North Pole Island. There are a lot of things inside. You can even find 6th or 7th rank beast cores here. I heard the most precious treasure of Jade Qilin Pavilion is an 8th rank beast's inner core. 8th rank inner core? Tianyan Sect has nascent soul cultivators? Ian nodded. Tianyan Sect has 2 nascent soul cultivators, and Wuwei School also has a nascent soul cultivator. Our North Pole Island is very small. We only have these 3 nascent soul cultivators. North Pole Island was indeed very small. Emo Chenga had seen the map. Compared with Yunzhong continent, North Pole Island was just a small dot in the north, roughly equivalent to a city in the 3 big countries. But such a small island actually had 3 nascent soul cultivators. She really wondered how many nascent soul cultivators there were in the whole of Yunzhong. Perhaps it would be twice as many as the 2 poles? Fairy, do you want to go into Jade Qilin Pavilion to take a look? Emo Chenga nodded indifferently. Okay. She had nothing to do anyway, so she might as well stroll around. Once she entered Jade Qilin Pavilion, a cultivator immediately came to greet her. Senior, please come in, please come in. Even if it was a shop of the #1 cultivation group on North Pole Island, it was still very enthusiastic when it came to entertaining its guests. Emo Chenga heard that although the spirit veins on North Pole Island weren't bad, there weren't many spirit stone veins, so they were very dependent on trading with foreign cultivators. Only in this way could they obtain enough spirit stones for their own cultivation. What do you need, senior? Our shop has the most abundant beast cores on North Pole Island. No matter what beast core you want, as long as you say it, you'll most likely find it in our shop. In addition, we also have spiritual plants, magic tools, and the like. The one who rushed over to greet them enthusiastically was a mortal cultivator with a big smile on his face. Ian took a look at Mo Chenga's expression, then bowed to the man. Big brother will take a look first. If we need anything, we'll call you. Okay, please take your time to look. The shop assistant was enthusiastic, but not overly so. After greeting them, he politely retreated. Mo Chenga thought in her heart that people from Yunzhong really knew how to do business. Not only did they make people feel that they were attentive, but they also weren't as sticky candy. Their enthusiasm was just right, making people feel very comfortable. She couldn't help but think that if the things were good, buying one or two wouldn't be bad. She looked around. This Jade Qilin pavilion was very big. It was densely packed with counters and people were coming and going. All of them were low-level cultivators who were talking to shop assistants in low voices. Fairy, the first floor sells low-level beast cores, which probably won't be interesting to you. The second floor sells middle-level beast cores. If you want a high-grade monster core, you can directly ask the shopkeeper here. However, if Fairy just wants to stroll around, it'd be better to go to the underground hall. That's the most distinctive place in Jade Qilin Pavilion. Underground hall? Mo Chenga asked with interest. How distinctive? Ian smiled. Fairy, you'll know once you take a look. Mo Chenga thought about it but didn't object. She nodded and said, lead the way. Ian curtsied and led her around those counters with familiarity. They entered a carved stone door and walked down the stone steps behind the door. Mo Chenga already sensed that there were a lot of people down there. When she reached the bottom and entered an open door, her eyes couldn't help but brighten. In front of her was a very spacious hall that could almost be called a public square. There were densely packed stalls inside, and countless cultivators and mortals were shuttling back and forth here. The sound of their conversations rang in her ears. Ian smiled and said, this underground hall is Jade Qilin Pavilion's signature. This is a free market. There are no shops here, only customers. No matter what cultivation level they are, if they want to buy or sell, they can come here to take a look. Jade Qilin Pavilion doesn't charge any fees. Mo Chenga slowly swept her gaze over and said, that being the case, what's the difference between this place and the stalls outside? The difference is that Jade Qilin Pavilion has a treasure appraiser stationed here. If the buyer and the seller reach an agreement, they can look for the appraiser here to appraise the authenticity and quality of the item. If the transaction is successful, Jade Qilin Pavilion will take a 10% fee. If the item doesn't match the seller's description and the transaction can't be concluded, they won't take a single cent. Oh. Mo Chenga finally understood. It's a bit safer for them to trade here, right? Yes. If the appraiser makes a mistake, Jade Qilin Pavilion will compensate them according to the price. What many cultivators fear the most when they come to North Pole Island to buy beast cores is to sell inferior ones as good ones, so they're willing to spend a bit more money to buy peace of mind. Chapter 348. Walking in the free market was an eye-opener for Mo Chenga. It was not because the things here were good, but because there were many kinds of monster cores. She had never heard of many monster cores. She thought they were the unique demonic beasts in Yunzhong. The cultivators doing business here ranged from the aura refining realm to the foundation building realm. She even saw 2 core formation cultivators. Most of the aura refining cultivators entering and exiting the place looked exhausted and unkempt. Baffled, Mo Chenga asked Ian, why do these aura refining cultivators look so dispirited? Ian answered, these cultivators are all hunting beasts here. Their cultivation levels are relatively low, so they can't hunt high-level demonic beasts. They can only kill first-rank demonic beasts. However, many first-rank demonic beasts don't even have a Yao Dan. It's not easy to find a Yao Dan, and the other materials of demonic beasts aren't worth much. At this point, Mo Chenga finally understood. These aura refining cultivators were the lowest level of the cultivators who supported the beast core market on North Pole Island. They did the most tiring and dangerous work to obtain beast cores with great difficulty. They brought them to this free market to sell and earn some spirit stones for their own cultivation. They were not businessmen but workers. In the past, when my father was still alive, he was also like this. Sometimes, when he came back from the sea, he would be so tired that he couldn't even stand steadily, but he still had to pull himself together and come out to sell Yao cores. Ian suddenly said in a daze. Your father? Emo Chenga turned to look at her. Yes. Ayan lowered her head and said softly, my father was also an immortal cultivator, but his spirit root wasn't good, and he has already passed away. After a moment of silence, Emo Chenga heaved a sigh and patted Emo Chenga's shoulder to comfort her. Ayan revealed a smile. Thank you, Fairy, I'm fine. Father has already passed away for 2 years, I'm already used to it. She turned around, raised her hand and pointed at a small door in the distance. She continued, that's where the Jade Qilin Pavilion's appraisers are located. Even if you don't want to trade, you can still find them to appraise your items. You just have to pay the appraisal fee. Emo Chenga looked up and saw that the small gate was filled with people coming and going. Most of them were buyers and sellers, but there were also some who were alone. She wasn't interested in the appraisal and looked away after a few glances. But a moment later it turned back. No, she seemed to have seen something just now. Emo Chenga strode towards the appraisal room. Fairy? Startled, Ayan followed. The small appraisal room was surrounded by several appraisers. Emo Chenga raised her head and looked around, but she didn't see the person she saw just now. Fairy, are you looking for someone? After searching for a while but finding nothing, Emo Chenga finally gave up. She squeezed out of the crowd and shook her head. Maybe I was mistaken. Oh. Ayan cleverly didn't ask any more questions. After this incident, Emo Chenga lost interest in shopping. She said, there's nothing to see here. Let's go. Once they left the free market, Emo Chenga didn't want to stroll around anymore. She thought for a moment then said to Ayan, I'm going to the seaside for a walk. It's not appropriate to take you with me, you should go back first. Yes. Ayan responded, then thought for a moment and said, Fairy, when cultivators go to hunt beasts, most of them go through the northeast pier. The west area is where the major sects are located, so they might not receive guests. Okay, I got it. Hearing her reply, Ayan curtsied, then turned around and left. Emo Chenga didn't stay there for long. She left the bazaar, flew into the air and flew east. As she flew, she thought about what happened just now. In that free market she saw a woman dressed in black. That woman's back was very similar to Nie Wuxiang's. According to reason, the road from the eastern sea to the South Pole Island was very hidden. If she hadn't seen the jade slip Emo Yaoqing left behind, the possibility of her finding it was very low. But if she went through the South Sea, the distance from the celestial pole to Yunzhong wasn't only long, but it was also extremely dangerous. How could Nie Wuxiang, a core formation cultivator, get there? Could it be that that woman wasn't Nie Wuxiang and she was mistaken? But that woman's back was too similar to Nie Wuxiang's, and the style of her clothes was also the same. Even if she might have mistaken her back, it was impossible for their clothes to be so similar, right? Emo Chenga knitted her brows and thought for a while, feeling full of questions. Besides, that woman's cultivation level was also in the foundation building realm, which didn't match. However, this wasn't certain. She could restrain her spiritual breath, so could others. She hadn't flown far when she suddenly felt several spiritual auras approaching her. Right now, she was pretending to be in the foundation building realm, so her flying speed was also very slow. These people were also in the foundation building realm. She didn't know what kind of flying magic tools they were using, but they unexpectedly caught up to her very quickly. Emo Chenga intended to give way, but who would have thought that those people would suddenly split up and flank her, completely surrounding her? Upon realizing this, she stopped and watched these cultivators approaching her with a frown. There were both men and women among them, and they all wore the same clothes. They seemed to be disciples of some cultivation group. Gentlemen, what's the matter? 3 early-stage foundation building cultivators and 2 middle-stage foundation building cultivators all had hostile expressions. Emo Chenga frowned. She was just passing by, and this place wasn't the location of the cultivation groups Ayan mentioned, so why did these people come? Upon hearing what she said, these people exchanged glances with each other. The middle-stage foundation building cultivator in the lead had a gloomy expression as he shouted, "Hand over the thing." Emo Chenga's frown deepened. Her gaze slowly swept over the cultivators surrounding her and she said, "Gentlemen, you must have mistaken me for someone else, right?" Under her gaze, these cultivators couldn't help but cower. Those with low cultivation levels were even more startled, as if they were being suppressed by a high-level cultivator. However, although this female cultivator's cultivation level was higher than theirs, she was only in the foundation building realm. Once he calmed his mind, the leader once again put on a cold expression. "Mistaken you for someone else? Your accent is obviously the same as that little thief's, yet you still say you're mistaken?" This person's tone was really unpleasant to hear. Moreover, without any explanation, he immediately identified her as a little thief, which made Emo Chenga even more unhappy. However, this wasn't the celestial pole and she was a newcomer, so it was better for her to restrain herself a bit. With that thought in mind, she swallowed her anger and said slowly, "Gentlemen, are there any misunderstandings? I just left the Beast Core Market and was about to go to the pier when I was intercepted by you on the way. I really don't know why you're here." Upon hearing what she said, these people's expressions changed greatly. One of them shouted, "Sure enough, it's you. You still dare to quibble." Emo Chenga was stunned. Was there something wrong with what she said? "Your Excellency." The leader clenched the magic tool in his hand and said coldly, "You'd better obediently hand over the thing. Although you're in the late stage of the foundation building realm, you can't escape even if the 5 of us work together." These people were obsessed with who she was. Regardless of the reason, Emo Chenga was also annoyed. She said coldly, "This is the last time I'm telling you, if I say I'm not, then I'm not. If you want to fight, go ahead." The leader's expression suddenly became unsightly. In the end, he clenched his teeth and signaled his companions with his eyes. Upon receiving his signal, the 5 of them moved almost at the same time. The 5 of them took out banners at the same time and each of them unfolded them in the wind. In an instant, spiritual aura surged and a cold wind blew. Emo Chenga narrowed her eyes. With her cultivation level, she naturally wasn't afraid of these 5 foundation-building cultivators. However, these 5 people's techniques were quite strange. It seemed to be a kind of formation that used people as a formation. She stared at the banners in their hands. The banners were painted with the Tai Chi 8 trigrams as well as some strange pictures. Although she didn't understand them very well, she could roughly tell they were some formation diagrams. A thought flashed through her mind and she asked, "Are you people from Tianyin sect?" Upon hearing that, the leader snorted coldly. "No need to act. You just stole something from our Jade Qilin Pavilion, so why are you acting like you don't know us?" Emo Chenga had always been amenable to coaxing but not coercion. This person's overbearing attitude made her unhappy, so she immediately flung her sleeves and released her momentum. "I really don't know. What are you going to do about it?" Once the momentum of a core formation cultivator was released, the 5 people's expressions changed greatly. One of them shouted, "Senior Marshal Brother, you're actually in the core formation realm?" The leader's face turned pale and red. His attitude became a bit more restrained, but his gaze became more resolute. "Your Excellency is a core formation senior, so why are you pretending to be in the foundation building realm? Don't tell me you don't have designs on our Tianyin sect?" Emo Chenga said coldly, "I'll restrain my spiritual breath if I want to. Why should I explain myself to juniors like you? You're falsely accusing me of stealing something from you for no reason, so do you think I have to explain everything clearly to you? Even if your Tianyin sect is the biggest cultivation group on North Pole Island, this doesn't make sense." After her speech, the 5 people hesitated. If she was a foundation-building cultivator, they could just take her back and hand her over to the cultivation group to be dealt with. However, this female cultivator was in the core formation realm. They couldn't beat her, but they also couldn't let her go. After all, she was the most suspicious person on their way here. In fact, Tianyin sect was also used to being the dominant sect on North Pole Island, so they couldn't lower their face. Previously, they aggressively came to stop them, but now that they found out the other party was a core formation senior, wouldn't they be a joke if they retreated? Besides, those martial uncles in the cultivation group wouldn't care about their suffering and would only say they didn't do their job well. "Senior." The leader finally softened his tone and said to Emo Chenga, "In fact, our Jade Qilin Pavilion lost an important item. If we don't do our job well, being punished when we go back is a small matter, but at that time the whole North Pole Island will be in turmoil. This matter is of great importance, so I'd like to ask Senior to go back with us and explain it clearly to our sect." The corners of Emo Chenga's mouth rose, forming a smiling expression. She was a core formation cultivator, yet she was implicated in some matter for no reason and was taken back by a few foundation-building cultivators. If word got out, wouldn't she become a laughing stock? Could it be that the people in Yunzhong all did things like this? Or was it because Tianyin sect was the most powerful here so they were this arrogant? Gentlemen, if your sect elders asked me, I might agree. But with just the few of you, wouldn't it be ridiculous for me to obediently go back with you? Senior. The one who looked the youngest among the 5 people shouted, "Although we're foundation-building cultivators, we represent Tianyin sect. If you're unwilling to go back with us, We'll have to report this to our sect elders. At that time I'm afraid you won't look good. Junior Marshal Brother Qiao. Once that person finished speaking, the leader immediately shouted. Unfortunately, he'd already said it. When he turned around, he saw that Mo Chinga's face was already covered in a layer of frost. Good. Go back and report this to your sect elders. She raised her head and arrogantly glanced at the 5 people in front of her. I'll wait for your sect elders to come and give me an explanation. Chapter 349. Mo Chinga flung her sleeves and left, and the 5 foundation building cultivators didn't chase after her. Senior Marshal Brother, what should we do? The foundation building cultivator asked anxiously. Although he was full of momentum just now that Mo Chinga flung her sleeves and left, he was worried. The leader frowned and said angrily, how would I know? Tianyin sect was indeed the biggest cultivation group on North Pole Island, but they were only foundation building cultivators and didn't have high-level cultivator seniors. Even if they suffered losses in front of a core formation cultivator, no one would stand up for them. On the contrary, their masters and seniors would think they didn't do their job well. After all, they were the ones who offended the other party with their words first. Thinking of this senior marshal brother had a headache. Forget it, let's go back first. In the end, he said, the thing we lost this time is very important, so the marshal uncles in the sect will definitely intervene. When we go back, we just need to report it honestly. At worst, we'll just be punished. Yes. The others were all dejected. It was already bad luck for them to lose something when they were in charge of guarding the place. They wanted to chase the person back to make up for their mistake, but they also caused this kind of trouble. With the sect head's strict management, they didn't know how heavy the punishment would be. Mo Chinga didn't mention these people. After flying for a while, she finally stopped. There was no anger on her face, only confusion. From the words of these foundation building cultivators just now, she deduced what happened. Someone must have stolen some kind of treasure from the Jade Qilin Pavilion just now. They chased after the thief, only to discover that she was acting suspiciously, so they thought she was the thief who stole the treasure. This was interesting. Since they regarded her as the thief who stole the treasure, it showed that her figure and cultivation level were similar to the thief's. Moreover, the time when the treasure was stolen should be when she left Jade Qilin Pavilion. In addition, as soon as she spoke, these foundation building cultivators said her accent was very similar to the thief's. She narrowed her eyes and remembered the figure she saw in Jade Qilin Pavilion that looked like Nie Wuxiang. Although Nie Wuxiang didn't look like her, their figures were similar if they didn't look at their faces. Moreover, at that time her cultivation level also seemed to be in the foundation building realm. Most importantly, if that person was really Nie Wuxiang, they were both from the celestial pole, so to the people in Yunzhong their accents were indeed similar. Could it be that Nie Wuxiang really came to Yunzhong? Once she thought of this possibility, Mo Chinga felt the situation was far from good. If Nie Wuxiang came to Yunzhong, did she come alone or with her master, Master Songfeng? What exactly did she steal from the Jade Qilin Pavilion? From the looks of these 5 foundation building cultivators, she must have stolen something extraordinary. She was Master Songfeng's disciple, so she presumably didn't lack spirit stones. If she could buy it, why did she have to steal it? Mo Chinga rubbed her forehead. She had a terrible headache. Why was she so unlucky? He was walking on his own path and did not meddle in other people's business, yet he was dragged into a quarrel again. Regardless of whether her guess was right or not, whether that person was Nie Wuxiang or not, she was already inevitably dragged into this matter. Just now, he didn't treat those foundation establishment cultivators nicely because of their arrogant attitude. The rule of the cultivation world was that the strong were respected. She was a core formation cultivator, so berating several foundation building cultivators naturally wasn't a problem. Even if these people were disciples of Tianyin sect, the #1 cultivation group on North Pole Island, it was still the same. However, that was all he could do. She was now on North Pole Island. As long as these people reported this matter, her whereabouts should be found very quickly. Due to her identity as a core formation cultivator, Tianyin sect's core formation cultivators would come out. At that time she could not give them any face like she did now. In any case, a powerful dragon couldn't suppress a local snake. Besides, Tianyin sect had 2 nascent soul cultivators, so she couldn't really fall out with them. She originally wanted to go to the docks to see how Yunzhong's cultivators hunted sea beasts and chat with them to learn more about Yunzhong. But now she was no longer in the mood, so she took a detour and simply went back to the inn. Ian was astonished to see her coming back so quickly. She had just arrived, but this fairy already came back. Sure enough, she was a powerful cultivator. Mo Chinga didn't feel like explaining to her. Before she went back to the cultivation room, she told her, "In the next few days, if I have visitors, just call me directly in the courtyard." Ayn was baffled. This fairy had lived here for more than half a month and hadn't even left the door. No matter how she looked at it, she didn't look like she was visiting a friend. This time she just went out for a trip, but she mentioned visitors. Ayn really didn't understand what was going on. However, she was only a maid hired by the inn to serve cultivators, so she wasn't qualified to ask why, so she just answered, "Yes." Mo Chinga furrowed her brows, stepped into the cultivation room, opened the defensive formation, and entered the virtual sky world. Inside the virtual sky world, everything was normal. Feifei and Xiaohua were playing and Xiaofan was cultivating in the stream. Compared to those two, Xiaofan not only had human-like intelligence, but its behavior was also more human-like. Although it was still a child among demonic beasts, it was very fanatical about cultivation. After entering the virtual sky world, it was even more like a fish in water. At this thought, Mo Chinga's mind wandered. She wasn't very used to the environment of the virtual sky world, but her three spiritual beasts didn't have this problem. Perhaps it was because demonic beasts' cultivation method was closer to instinct? Unfortunately, she couldn't use demonic beasts' cultivation method for reference. Otherwise, she and she wouldn't have to be separated. The people from Tianyin sect came faster than she expected. In less than half a day, while Mo Chinga was meditating inside the virtual sky world with her eyes closed, she heard Ayan's voice from outside, telling her that there was a visitor. Mo Chinga sighed, opened her eyes and used her divine sense to order Xiaofan and Xiaohua to come over. "Master, is something the matter?" Mo Chinga stroked Xiaohua, who had thrown itself into her arms, then said to the two beasts, "It might be a bit troublesome. You two go into the spiritual beast bag first and follow me out." Xiaofan didn't ask anything. Seeing Mo Chinga open the spiritual beast bag, it very consciously went inside. Xiaohua, on the other hand, rolled several times unhappily before reluctantly entering the spiritual beast bag. Mo Chinga put away the two spiritual beast bags and made sure all her magic weapons were in the most suitable places, ready to fight at any time. She didn't stay any longer. She went out of the virtual sky world, opened the restriction and walked out. "Fairy." Upon seeing her, Ayan stepped forward and bowed. "The guest is waiting in the hall." Mo Chinga nodded with a smile, then walked towards the small reception hall. Ayan was well trained, so she had already invited the guest into the hall and served them good tea. Right now, the person sitting in the hall was an early-stage core formation female cultivator. She had a head full of pearls and jade, and her clothes were layered with ornaments, looking incomparably gorgeous. Just by looking at her back, one would feel she had a threatening air of nobility. Mo Chinga couldn't help but think of her master, Lord Daoist Jinghe. This style was really similar to her master's. If Lord Daoist Jinghe had the style of an incapable ruler, then this female cultivator had the style of an empress. This female cultivator was leisurely drinking tea. When she sensed someone coming, she put down the teacup unhurriedly and raised her head to meet Mo Chinga's gaze. At that moment, Mo Chinga couldn't help but be stunned. This female cultivator was beautiful. She had a threatening air of immortality and was also noble and elegant. She was the kind of beauty Mo Chinga had never seen in the cultivation world. Compared with those fairies who looked as elegant as immortals but were in fact vulgar, although this female cultivator had secular magnificence, her temperament was even more detached from the secular world. Upon seeing Mo Chinga, this female cultivator stood up and bowed to greet her. "I'm a cultivator from Tianyin sect. My Taoist name is Chizu. Outsiders call me Madame Chizu out of courtesy. Greetings to fellow Taoist." Mo Chinga bowed to return the greeting. "Fellow Taoist Chizu is too polite. My surname is Mo and my first name is Qingwei." "So it's fellow Taoist Qingwei." Madame Chizu smiled and praised her neither hurriedly nor slowly. "Fellow Taoist Qingwei looks so young, but your cultivation level is already in the middle stage of the core formation realm. It's really shocking. Isn't fellow Taoist Chizu also young and beautiful? Why must you make fun of me?" Mo Chinga said faintly, then called out to Madame Chizu. "Fellow Taoist, please sit." Madame Chizu sat down with a smile, then picked up her teacup again. The two of them took the opportunity to drink tea while secretly sizing each other up. Mo Chinga could see that although this Madame Chizu was only in the early stage of the core formation realm, her status in Tianyin sect shouldn't be low. She had a graceful temperament, her every movement was calm and composed, and there was an indistinct might around her. Ordinary core formation cultivators didn't have this kind of might. Presumably, she held power in the sect to have this kind of momentum. While Mo Chenga was sizing the other party up, Madame Chizu was also looking at her. When she first saw Mo Chenga, astonishment flitted across her eyes. Although many of the high-level female cultivators in the immortal cultivation world retained their youthful beauty, in the eyes of experienced people, they would still be able to see the subtle differences. However, this core formation female cultivator she'd never seen on North Pole Island seemed to be very young. Suspicion arose in Madame Chizu's heart. Could it be that she was a disciple of some big cultivation group on the mainland? With that thought in mind, Madame Chizu's eyes flickered. She asked with a smile, "Fellow Taoist Qingwei, may I know where you're from and why did you come to North Pole Island?" For cultivators, such a direct question was rather impolite, but when Madame Chizu said it with such a tone and expression, it made people feel that it was only natural. Mo Chenga put down her teacup then said with a smile, "Forgive me, fellow Taoist. I can't tell you my background in detail, but my purpose for coming here is ordinary. I just went out to travel and came here." Madame Chizu raised her eyebrows slightly and asked, "Fellow Taoist, you're just traveling and not here to buy beast cores?" Mo Chenga answered calmly, "If I see suitable beast cores I'll naturally buy them. However, it doesn't matter if I can't buy them." Upon hearing her answer, Madame Chizu smiled. This kind of behavior was indeed like that of a cultivator from a big cultivation group. Only people like them wouldn't take a huge beast core market like North Pole Island seriously. With that thought in mind, Madame Chizu said slowly, "Fellow Taoist Qingwei, I heard from the innkeeper just now that you claim to be an individual cultivator and even suppressed your cultivation level, pretending to be a foundation-building cultivator. May I know if there's any trouble you can't talk about?" Mo Chenga smiled faintly. She stared at Madame Chizu but didn't say anything. Under Mo Chenga's gaze, Madame Chizu gradually felt that her question was a bit inappropriate. Since it was a trouble she couldn't talk about, how could she talk about it to an outsider? "Fellow Taoist Chizu," Mo Chenga said, "I don't like to be ostentatious and I also don't like to talk about my master's background. I don't need to explain this to you, do I?" Although Mo Chenga's current expression was smiling, how could a smart person like Madame Chizu not sense the warning in Mo Chenga's words? This thought immediately emerged in Madame Chizu's mind that this woman wasn't someone to be trifled with. Madame Chizu was about to speak, but Mo Chenga raised her hand to stop her. She dusted off her sleeves then said calmly, "I know fellow Taoist's purpose for coming here. Since fellow Taoist treats me politely and I'm not ungrateful, I'll explain it clearly to your group." Chapter 350. A smile soon appeared on Madame Chizu's face. She said earnestly, "I'm extremely honored that fellow Taoist Qingwei can understand. Just now, my sect's disciples were incompetent and offended fellow Taoist. I apologize on their behalf." As she said this, Madame Chizu stood up and bowed cautiously. Upon seeing this, a smile appeared on Mo Chenga's face and she made a gesture to help him up. "Fellow Taoist, you're too polite. It's just a junior's impetuous behavior. There's no need to be like this." The two of them looked at each other and smiled. They were very satisfied with each other's tactfulness. Tianyin sect was the largest cultivation group on North Pole Island, so Mo Chenga naturally didn't want to offend them. Since the other party had expressed goodwill, she naturally took advantage of the situation. Madame Chizu, on the other hand, thought that since this female cultivator was young and had a profound cultivation level, it was very likely that she was a disciple of a large sect, so it would be better to rope her in. Those who had cultivated to the core formation realm were at least somewhat clever, even if they didn't have great wisdom. Nobody wanted to make enemies out of nothing. The two of them had a tacit understanding and sat down to drink tea again. Mo Chenga smiled and said, "In fact, I'm also confused about this matter. Today, I indeed went to the monster core market and also entered your Tianyin sect's Jade Qilin Pavilion. However, I only looked around for a while before leaving. The maidservants outside could testify to this. It was my first time on North Pole Island, so I wanted to go to the docks to see how the cultivators here hunted beast. Who knew that when I was halfway there, I'd be stopped by several foundation-building cultivators from your sect. In terms of time, I was only separated from the maidservant for the time it takes to brew a cup of tea. There's simply no time for me to steal the goods of your esteemed sect. Fellow Taoist Chizu can verify this." Madame Chizu nodded as she listened. By the time Madame Chizu finished speaking, she already smiled and said, "Since fellow Taoist Qingwei already explained it clearly, I naturally believe you. It's those kids from my sect who don't know how to do things and have disturbed you. I'm really sorry. Emo Chinga smiled faintly. Tianyin's sect found this place so quickly, so her whereabouts should have been investigated long ago. However, in the end she was a core formation cultivator, so a cultivator in the same realm as her had to meet her to completely eliminate suspicion. Since this Madame Chizu believed her the moment she heard what she said, then this matter could be considered to be over. Since it's a misunderstanding, let's just talk about it. Fellow Daoist Chizu, you don't have to worry about it. Emo Chinga paused for a moment, then asked after some deliberation. Fellow Daoist Chizu, logically speaking, this matter is your group's secret. I'm an outsider, so I shouldn't ask too much. However, since this matter involves me, I would like to ask, how is that little thief similar to me, causing your sect's disciples to misunderstand me as a thief? I wonder if fellow Daoist can tell me? Madame Chizu muttered to herself for a moment, then said, Fellow Daoist Qingwei, this matter involves my group's internal affairs, so please forgive me for not being able to tell you in detail. However, I can answer fellow Daoist's question. According to the disciples of my sect, that thief is a foundation establishment female cultivator. Whether it's her figure or her cultivation level, both match fellow Daoists. Most importantly, fellow Daoist's accent is exactly the same as that person's. Even if they aren't the same person, they should be from the same hometown. I see. Emo Chinga's expression didn't change as she nodded faintly. Seeing that Emo Chinga's expression didn't change, Madame Chizu pondered for a moment. In the end, she stood up and said with a smile, Fellow Daoist Qingwei, my humble sect still has a lot of chores to take care of. Since the misunderstanding has been resolved, I should also take my leave. I'm very sorry for disturbing you this time. If fellow Daoist Qingwei is still on North Pole Island, I'll invite you to a gathering again. Fellow Daoist Chizu is too polite. Emo Chinga also stood up. Since fellow Daoist has something to do, I won't say much. I hope we'll have a chance to meet again in the future. Madame Chizu smiled and curtsied. I hope so. After seeing Madame Chizu off, Emo Chinga returned to the small hall, and her expression immediately darkened. In Jade Qilin Pavilion she saw a figure similar to Nie Wuxiang, who seemed to be in the foundation building realm. Jade Qilin Pavilion was robbed at that time. The thief's cultivation level and figure were similar. Tianyin sect's disciples said her accent was also similar to that person's. In the whole of North Pole Island and even in Yunzhong, aside from people who also came from the Celestial Pole, who else would have a similar accent as her? With so many coincidences coming together, the answer was already on the verge of being revealed. Nie Wuxiang. She wasn't mistaken. That person was indeed Nie Wuxiang. In this way it triggered another fatal speculation. Did Nie Wuxiang come alone or with Master Song Feng? Thinking of this possibility, Emo Chinga's face turned pale. She wasn't afraid of rushing into Yunzhong alone. In any case, she was a core formation cultivator now, so she was confident that she could already hold her own with her own abilities. But if she really ran into Master Song Feng here, it would be a disaster. She had lived for more than 100 years and met many nascent soul cultivators, but only this Master Song Feng made her feel fear from the bottom of her heart. Because of this person, she almost experienced the most terrifying thing a woman could do. This made her realize that her strength was far from enough. Only by standing at the top of the cultivators could she guarantee that she wouldn't get hurt. If she had the chance, she wished she could grind this person's bones and scatter his ashes. But now her strength wasn't enough. If she ran into Master Song Feng again, she might not be so lucky. Fairy. Ayan's trembling voice rang in her ears. Emo Chinga turned around, put away her gloomy expression, and asked faintly, What's wrong? Ayan hesitated for a long time, then asked cautiously, Fairy, you haven't offended Tianyin sect, right? Emo Chinga frowned. Did your shopkeeper ask me to ask? Ayan shook her head. I just want to remind Fairy that Tianyin sect has 2 nascent soul cultivators, so it's fully deserving of being the #1 sect on North Pole Island. If Fairy has any conflicts with them, it'd be best for you to endure it. Upon seeing her worried expression, Emo Chinga felt warmth in her heart. She smiled and said, It's all right. I don't have any conflicts with them. Ayan heaved a sigh of relief and touched her chest. That's good. Fairy is an amiable person. I don't want Fairy to suffer losses here. Hearing what she said, Emo Chinga smiled. Thank you. Before long, the inn's shopkeeper Dong hurried over and respectfully apologized to Emo Chinga. As it turned out, when Madame Chizu came to visit, he already knew that Emo Chinga was a core formation cultivator. He felt that his hospitality wasn't satisfactory and didn't match her status as a core formation cultivator, so he especially came to ask Mo Chenga if she needed anything. Mo Chenga deliberately lowered her cultivation level, so she naturally didn't have any other opinions. She just expressed that she didn't need anything and that things were fine as they were, then sent shopkeeper Dong away. After shopkeeper Dong left, she told Ian that she wouldn't go out during this period of time and that if anyone came to visit, she should just decline and not disturb them. Soon after, she returned to the cultivation room, opened the defensive formation and entered the virtual sky world. Just a moment ago, she thought of another possibility. People came and went in the Beast Core market, and there were many cultivators leaving at every moment. How did those 5 foundation building cultivators catch up with her so coincidentally? Even if there weren't many female foundation building cultivators, and there were even fewer who had a similar figure to Nie Wuxiang, it was still impossible for them to target her so quickly, right? Thinking about it this way, it was very likely that Nie Wuxiang left in the same direction as her, so when those foundation building cultivators saw her, they naturally regarded her as a thief. In that case, another problem arose. If Nie Wuxiang really went in the same direction as her, was it possible that she discovered her? Thinking one step further, was it possible that Nie Wuxiang discovered her and deliberately led the pursuers to her? Mo Chenga was drenched in cold sweat. She didn't dare to think about it anymore. She calmed herself down and thought about it carefully again. Although this was only her conjecture, it was still a possibility. Her divine sense was powerful, but Nie Wuxiang was Master Song Feng's disciple after all. Who knew if she had some strange method to hide her breath from her? After thinking for a long time, Mo Chenga exhaled. Since she already had a guess, she had to think of a countermeasure. She didn't have any hatred for Nie Wuxiang. Back on Demonic Mountain, although it was she who led the way for Master Song Feng, she was his disciple after all, so what she did was understandable. As for later, Nie Wuxiang saved her, so she was a bit grateful. In any case, Nie Wuxiang helped her avoid a terrible experience. However, she was the one who brought Master Song Feng here, and Nie Wuxiang's identity was very sensitive. Although Mo Chenga felt a bit grateful, she never thought about repaying her or doing anything else. She just thought that if she could avoid Nie Wuxiang in the future, she shouldn't be enemies with Nie Wuxiang, which could also be considered repaying her. Now that Nie Wuxiang might appear here and plot against her, Mo Chenga became even more cautious. Although that was what she thought, she didn't think Nie Wuxiang thought the same. After all, Nie Wuxiang's identity was there. With Master Song Feng here, they were enemies. Thinking up to this point, Mo Chenga already made a decision. Whether Master Song Feng was here or not, she didn't want to get involved in this matter. Since she already explained it to Tianyin sect, she'd just pretend she didn't know and stay out of it. She had the virtual sky world. As long as she hid and didn't go out, neither Tianyin sect nor Master Song Feng could find her. Mo Chenga smiled, opened the spiritual beast bag and released Xiaohua and Xiaofan. It's all right. You can go play. Xiaohua barked cheerfully and immediately ran away, probably to find Fei Fei to continue playing. Xiaofan, however, didn't move. She floated in the air and said with some worry, "Master, are you worried?" Mo Chenga was stunned. Xiaofan said, "The space between your eyebrows is wrinkled. Is there some trouble?" Mo Chenga was stunned for a moment then smiled. "It's nothing. Although it's a bit troublesome, as long as we don't go out, we'll be fine." Xiaofan nodded, not really understanding. "Then are we going to stay here for a long time?" Mo Chenga pondered for a moment. "We can stay out of it if we don't go out. Let's stay here for a month first. You just need to cultivate. Something happens, I'll call you." "Okay," she said. Xiaofan didn't have any questions and said, "Then I'll go back to cultivate." "Go." Xiaofan went back to the brook to continue cultivating, while Xiaohua and Fei Fei were still rolling around and playing. Mo Chenga thought for a moment, then took out the 2 stone sculpture puppets and ordered them to take care of the medicinal fields. She took advantage of this time to take out the magic weapons she got from Mo Yaoqing's cave. Spirit Guiding Bead, 8 trigrams Diagram of Tai Chi, Lotus Umbrella, Spirit Clouds Rui, and Land Shrinking Ruler. Among these 5 things, the Spirit Guiding Bead, 8 trigrams Diagram of Tai Chi, and Lotus Umbrella were all auxiliary objects that didn't need to be deliberately refined. The other 2, however, needed to be refined before they could display their greater power. There was no need to mention Spirit Clouds Rui. This was the magic weapon Mo Yaoqing used in fights of magical powers. Mo Yaoqing was originally a cultivator from Yunzhong, so if she refined this treasure well, it would be very helpful for her in Yunzhong. In addition, she also had to pay attention to the Land Shrinking Ruler. After advancing to the core formation realm, she couldn't rely on the virtual sky world as a life-saving means. 4 high-level cultivators, entering the virtual sky world for a few breaths could determine life and death, so she must have another life-saving means. It was better to take advantage of this time to refine these 2 magic weapons. If something happened, they would come in handy. Chapter 351. Another half a month passed by. During this half a month, Mo Tiange didn't go out. She just quietly cultivated in the virtual sky world and refined her magic weapons. The cultivators from Tianyan sect didn't come again, and Ian also didn't disturb her. This made her sigh of relief, but at the same time she felt a bit worried. Was that person Ye Wuxiang? Did Master Song Feng come to Yunzhong with her? What happened between her and Tianyan sect? She really wanted to know about these things, but it was inconvenient to ask in the current situation, so she could only suppress her curiosity and continue to refine her magic weapons. While she was concentrating on refining, she suddenly heard Ian's anxious voice. Fairy, fairy. Mo Tiange opened her eyes, stopped breathing, put away her magic weapons and came out of the virtual sky world. What's the matter? It was dark outside, so Ian didn't dare to enter the house. She reported in the courtyard, Fairy, someone wants to see you. Mo Tiange focused her mind and sensed there were other cultivators in the small courtyard. An early-stage core formation cultivator and 2 foundation building cultivators. After thinking for a while, she removed the restriction and stepped out of the house. The core formation cultivator waiting in the courtyard was unexpectedly Madame Chizu. Upon seeing her coming out, Madame Chizu smiled and bowed to greet her. Fellow Daoist Qingwei, I'm here to disturb you again. Mo Tiange was a bit surprised, but she calmly returned the greeting and asked, Fellow Daoist, is there something important for you to visit so late at night? Madame Chizu frowned and forced a smile. There's indeed something. May I ask if fellow Daoist Qingwei knows the female cultivator who lives nearby? The fairy, who lived in another small courtyard shopkeeper Dong mentioned? Mo Tiange shook her head. To be honest, fellow Daoist Chizu, I haven't met any cultivators since I came to North Pole Island, and I haven't left the house for the past half a month. Really? The expression on Madame Chizu's face was very strange. She heaved a sigh of relief, but at the same time she looked even more worried. She thought for a while and asked again, Then these past few days, did fellow Daoist Divine Sense discover any traces of other cultivators? This question made Mo Tiange raise her eyebrows. Fellow Daoist Chizu, you should know that cultivators keep their distance from each other. Since it's someone else's residence over there, of course, I won't use my divine sense to investigate. This was an unwritten rule between cultivators. Cultivators had a very strong sense of self-protection. A place like a cave residence was absolutely not allowed to be invaded by outsiders. If others used their divine sense to investigate, they would most likely be regarded as a person with ulterior motives. Realizing that her question was somewhat inappropriate, Madame Chizu was startled for a moment before she revealed a smile and said apologetically, I'm sorry, my words were inappropriate. To tell you the truth, we've been investigating for half a month and have already found out the identity of the thief. It just so happens that he lives in the courtyard closest to you. But when we arrived, we couldn't find him. I remembered that fellow Daoist Qingwei happened to be nearby, so I came to ask. Mo Tiange was dumbfounded. Such a coincidence? Isn't that so? When I first heard the news, I also didn't dare to believe it. Madame Chizu's gaze was fixed on her. Although she had a smile on her face, her expression was somewhat nervous. Mo Tiange smiled bitterly in her heart. Perhaps this Madame Chizu was worried that she was also an accomplice. That person stole something from Tianyan sect, and she just happened to go to Jade Qilin Pavilion. Furthermore, her figure and accent were similar. After she clarified the matter, it turned out that that person also happened to live near her. With so many coincidences, how could she not suspect her? Thinking up to this point, Mo Tiange sighed. Fellow Daoist Chizu, was that person also a core formation cultivator? Madame Chizu nodded. Yes. Her gaze shifted and she said, because the stolen item is precious, our sect's nascent soul seniors have already set out. Presumably they'll be able to retrieve it in a few days. Upon hearing her answer, Mo Tiange said faintly, then I wish your sect will be able to successfully retrieve the lost item. After saying that, the two of them were somewhat speechless. After standing for a while, Madame Chizu finally smiled and took her leave. Since fellow Daoist didn't see it, I'll take my leave. I'm deeply sorry for disturbing you so late at night. Mo Tiange showed a faint smile. No problem. Fellow Dawish Chizu doesn't need to be polite. I still have something to do, so I won't be seeing you off. Madame Chizu nodded with a smile, then turned around and left with the two foundation-building disciples. When they were far away and there were no longer any traces of cultivators around, Mo Chinga turned around and said, "Ayan, everything's fine now. You can go back and rest." "Yes," Ayan answered. She watched as Mo Chinga turned around and entered the cultivation room, then she also returned to her small side room. Once she entered the cultivation room, Mo Chinga immediately started to cast the restriction. Her gaze shifted to a corner. "Come out." Shortly after she spoke, a shadow slowly appeared in the corner. That shadow became clearer and clearer until finally a person appeared. The person was dressed in black and had a delicate and pretty face. It was Nie Wuxiang. "You can actually find me?" Nie Wuxiang's voice was low and hoarse. Mo Chinga smiled. She sat down at the table and poured 2 cups of tea. "It's been many years since we last met." Fellow Taoist Nie were really faded. Nie Wuxiang frowned but didn't answer. Instead, she walked towards Mo Chinga and sat across from her. "How did you find me?" Mo Chinga stared at her. Her gaze swept around the room and she said with a faint smile, "Not only did you enter this courtyard but you also entered my room. I laid my own unique formation in this room. Although your concealment technique is brilliant, I can still find you." "I see." Nie Wuxiang nodded, then picked up the teacup and took a sip. Mo Chinga's gaze flickered. She didn't quite understand what Nie Wuxiang meant. Hiding in her room without telling her seemed to be an offense. But Nie Wuxiang still dared to come in even though she knew there was a restriction here, and drank the tea she poured without any wariness. This Nie Wuxiang seemed to be certain that she wouldn't harm her? "Fellow Taoist Nie," Mo Chinga said after a long time, "how did you come to Yunzhong? And why did you steal Tianyan Sec's things?" Nie Wuxiang looked up and slightly raised the corners of her mouth. She said, "In fact, you want to ask whether my master also came or not, right?" Mo Chinga paused for a moment, then smiled. "Do you still need to ask? You stole Tianyan Sec's things and hid in my place, so your master definitely isn't with you." Nie Wuxiang was stunned. She lowered her eyes and held the teacup without saying anything. Mo Chinga felt the situation before her was a bit strange. She and Nie Wuxiang's respective masters had great enmity. There was kindness and enmity between them, but the two of them met in Yunzhong, thousands of miles away from the celestial pole. If that was all, it wouldn't be a big deal. But now, Nie Wuxiang stole something from the number 1 sect on North Pole Island and hid in her place, seemingly without any wariness. Why didn't she remember her relationship with Nie Wuxiang being so good? In any case, Nie Wuxiang was well aware that she was inside the formation and restriction, but she was still so calm, so she probably didn't have any hostility. Just as Mo Chinga was thinking, Nie Wuxiang stopped contemplating, looked up and asked, "Fellow Taoist Mo, how did you come to Yunzhong? Where's your husband? Did he come with you?" Mo Chinga was stunned. "You know, I have a Taoist partner?" Nie Wuxiang's lips curved into a smile. "Fellow Taoist Mo, don't underestimate the fame of the two of you. Your husband formed his nascent soul in his early 200 years and is in the limelight in the celestial pole. As for you, you're also a genius who formed your gold core before turning 100 years old. The news of the two of you cultivating as dual cultivators has pretty much spread in the celestial pole. As long as I pay attention, I'll naturally find out." Mo Chinga really didn't expect it. Forget about Qin Shi, at least she didn't think she was that famous. However, Nie Wuxiang mentioning this made her notice another thing. "Fellow Taoist Nie, my dual cultivation only took 3 to 5 years. Did you also arrive in Yunzhong recently?" Nie Wuxiang nodded and cast a sidelong glance at her. "Fellow Taoist Mo, I was the one who asked you just now." Mo Chinga smiled. "In the beginning, I was the one who asked fellow Taoist Nie how you came to Yunzhong, but fellow Taoist Nie also didn't answer." The two of them stared at each other. After staring for a while, they both felt a bit bored, so they withdrew their gazes and sighed. Their sighs were of the same mind. The two of them were stunned. They looked at each other and couldn't help but smile. With such a smile, the two of them imperceptibly became a bit closer. Those messy grievances were also temporarily thrown to the back of their minds. "All right, I'll answer first," Nie Wuxiang said. Nie Wuxiang said, "I got a treasure from my master. With the help of this treasure, I was able to safely cross the South Sea. But I went in the wrong direction and drifted to North Pole Island." She then looked at Mo Chinga. "What about you? How did you come to Yunzhong? I don't see your husband. Don't tell me you're also alone?" Mo Chinga answered, Yes, I'm indeed alone. Originally, I just broke through to the middle stage of the core formation realm, so I went out to travel. Later, I accidentally found a path, so I came to Yunzhong. The two of them spoke vaguely. After all, their relationship was complicated, so some things didn't need to be explained too clearly. After giving a brief explanation, Mo Chenga asked, "Fellow Taoist Nye, you stole something from Tianyin sect and then hid in my place. What's the meaning of this?" "What? You don't want me to hide?" Nye Wuxiang asked instead of answering. Mo Chenga was dumbfounded. She then shook her head. "I don't want to meddle in your business, nor do I want to catch thieves for Tianyin sect. Where you are has nothing to do with me." Upon hearing that, Nye Wuxiang smiled. "That being the case, why do you have to ask?" Mo Chenga frowned and said, "Fellow Taoist Nye, you're now in my cultivation room. If I don't ask, how can I continue living here?" Nye Wuxiang thought for a moment, then nodded. "What you said makes sense. Alright, let's talk about our relationship first." Mo Chenga always felt that the Nye Wuxiang in front of her was different from the one she met on Demonic Mountain, and even more different from the one she met at the sect more than 60 years ago. Although the previous Nye Wuxiang had a delicate appearance, she looked vicious and had a strange character. However, the one in front of her was obviously a lot more relaxed, and her whole body was full of a kind of lively aura. Perhaps it was because she left Master Song Feng? She couldn't help but have this thought. This wasn't impossible. When they met on Demonic Mountain, Nye Wuxiang's behavior was very clear. Master Song Feng beat and scolded this disciple at every turn, and Nye Wuxiang also revealed feelings of fear and hatred towards her master. Thinking up to this point, Mo Chenga's mind was moved. Nye Wuxiang just said she obtained a treasure from Master Song Feng, which was why she could leave the celestial pole and come to Yunzhong. This sounded a bit strange. To be able to cross the South Sea by relying on this treasure must have great magical powers. Based on Master Song Feng's attitude towards her, it was impossible for him to give her such a magic treasure, right? Was it possible that she stole Master Song Feng's magic treasure and secretly escaped? Chapter 352. Seeing Mo Chenga staring at her like that, Nye Wuxiang was bewildered and looked down at herself. "What's wrong?" Mo Chenga smiled and went straight to the point. "Did you escape?" Nye Wuxiang's expression darkened in an instant, and she clenched her fists. Mo Chenga glanced at her hand and said, "Don't forget you were in my formation." Nye Wuxiang was startled and relaxed. After a while she finally said, "Yes, I betrayed my master, stole his treasured magic weapon and fled the celestial pole." At this point she stared at Mo Chenga. "Are you happy now?" After confirming her guess, Mo Chenga finally felt like a huge rock had been lifted from her heart. The enmity between her and Nye Wuxiang was because of Master Song Feng. If she left Master Song Feng, the two of them wouldn't be enemies. She smiled and looked at Nye Wuxiang. "Yes, I'm very happy. Aren't you happy?" Such calmness stunned Nye Wuxiang. She stared at Mo Chenga with complicated feelings. She remembered the first time she saw her, she was only in the middle stage of the foundation building realm. As Lord Taoist Jinghe's disciple, she received female guests at Lord Taoist Xuanin's soul formation ceremony. At that time, she knew her master was going to Xianqing school to cause trouble for Lord Taoist Jinghe, so she paid special attention to this Lord Taoist Jinghe's disciple. She thought she was obviously a proud child, but she had to pretend to be indifferent, which made people hate her. She admitted she was jealous at that time, and because of that she couldn't help but hate her. The next time she met her was several decades later. At that time she had just advanced to the core formation realm and followed her master to Demonic Mountain. At that time, Master Taoist Qingwei already had a small reputation. When she traveled around Kunwu, she occasionally heard people talk about how Lord Taoist Jinghe of Xianqing School accepted another genius disciple who advanced to the core formation realm within 100 years. Her initial jealousy was gradually forgotten after several decades, but when she met her again she still couldn't control herself from hating her. Why was she so lucky as a woman? She had a master who loved his disciple as much as his own life and a senior martial brother who cherished her so much. As for herself, she had nothing. Seeing how perfect she was, she hated herself for her imperfections. However, when her master wanted to destroy this perfection and let the three of them taste the disgusting taste of swallowing a fly, she couldn't bear it anymore. Therefore, she tampered with the order and even went back to stop it when her master was rushing to Jade Palace. She couldn't figure out why she would do that. Perhaps it was because of her perfection that he had a longing for her, so he couldn't bear to destroy her? Or perhaps as a woman such a thing was too cruel, so cruel that even she couldn't accept it. It was no longer necessary to investigate the reason. By the time she reacted, she had already done so. Then, when her master went to Jade Palace, she left Demonic Mountain almost as if she was fleeing for her life. She was very afraid. She was afraid of how her master would punish her if he knew that she had done such a thing. Would he be so angry that he would slap her to death? Or should he trap her in the original devil pool and make her suffer a fate worse than death? But even though she was so scared that she could hardly control herself, she never regretted it. Who would have thought that a change would occur on Demonic Mountain and she would escape a calamity instead? Although her master fled in disarray, he was seriously injured and didn't know what she had done. In the following 10 years, her master had been in closed-door meditation to heal his injuries and had no time to pay attention to her. She was relieved for the time being, but she was still concerned about this matter. Her master would find out sooner or later. When he found out, she would be lucky if she could be slapped to death by him. She didn't want to die and wanted to live a better life, so her desire to escape became more and more urgent day by day. Her master was seriously injured and had no time to care about her. Was there a better time than now? She planned for a long time and finally made up her mind. She decided to go all the way and steal her master's magic weapon while he was healing his injuries and fled the celestial pole. From that moment on, she had no late-stage nascent soul master and no backer. However, she had freedom, the freedom she yearned for day and night. Crossing the South Sea and escaping from the celestial pole was a dangerous move for her. She knew better than anyone else about her master's vengeful personality. Since she had betrayed her master, there was no way out. If she was caught by him, she would be in a state worse than death. That being the case, she might as well risk it. Even if she died in the South Sea, it would be better than the rest of her life. Fortunately, after letting her down for more than 100 years, God finally gave her hope this time, allowing her to cross the South Sea and safely arrive at Yunzhong's North Pole Island. But she never expected that she would meet Master Daoist Qingwei here again. Before leaving the Celestial Pole, she learned that her senior martial brother had succeeded in forming his nascent soul and the two of them had become dual cultivation Dao companions. According to reason, shouldn't they be inseparable at this time? Why were they separated and came to Yunzhong thousands of miles away by themselves? She felt very confused. She suddenly realized she couldn't understand this, God's favored one. Mo Qingge raised her eyebrows and asked, "What's wrong?" She didn't speak for a long time. Nie Wuxiang withdrew her gaze and said faintly, "Nothing. I just suddenly realized I don't seem to understand you." Mo Qingge frowned. She didn't quite understand what Nie Wuxiang meant. In the next moment, Nie Wuxiang smiled. "Forget it. Let's not talk about these things. Let's continue to discuss our relationship." Mo Qingge waved her hand. "Since you've left your master, even if we're not friends, we won't be enemies. Of course, as long as you're not hostile." Nie Wuxiang stared at her, her gaze becoming complicated again. You also saved me." She smiled. "In any case, you were the one who stopped that matter in the end. I didn't have a chance back then, so I have to thank you now." Nie Wuxiang's gaze moved. It could be said that the reason she was sitting here today was directly caused by this matter. If she hadn't saved Mo Qingge, she wouldn't have chosen to escape out of fear of her master's punishment, and she wouldn't have taken the risk to cross the South Sea and come to North Pole Island. "Why are you thanking me? If I hadn't taken master there, you wouldn't have." Mo Qingge just smiled. "Not long after you left, you brought your master back. Presumably your master was nearby, right? With his divine sense as the first late-stage nascent soul cultivator in the Celestial Pole, I'm afraid he'd have discovered us long ago. Of course, it's not that I don't care at all. It's just that the enmity between you and me is all because of your master. Since you've already left him, there's no need to mention it again." Nie Wuxiang's expression was complicated. She stared at her for a long time before she finally said, "That day it wasn't me who took my master there. As soon as we came out of the fog, we were discovered by him." Mo Qingge wasn't surprised to hear this. She just nodded lightly. "I see." Judging from Nie Wuxiang's attitude this time, Mo Qingge already guessed that Nie Wuxiang wasn't hostile towards her. That was for the best. Mo Qingge didn't want to be enemies with Nie Wuxiang. The two of them were silent for a long time before Mo Qingge asked, "Do you have anything else to say?" Nie Wuxiang shook her head, hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "You don't have to worry about Tianyan sect implicating you. I don't think they can discover me even if they're nascent soul cultivators." "You're that confident?" Mo Qingge was a bit surprised. In fact, she wasn't afraid of being implicated. Her unique formation wasn't a common one. Even a nascent soul cultivator's divine sense would be blocked outside. Nie Wuxiang curled her lips into a proud smile. My concealment technique has never failed. Otherwise, how could I dare to steal things from Tianyan sect? That was true. Without Master Song Feng, she was only an early-stage core formation cultivator now. How could she fight against Tianyan sect, which had 2 nascent soul cultivators? Since she dared to do it, she naturally had something to rely on. Mo Chinga thought for a moment, then asked, "Why did you want to steal things from Tianyan sect?" Upon seeing Nie Wuxiang's hesitant expression, Mo Chinga added, "I'm just asking. If you don't want to answer, you don't have to." "There's nothing I can't say." Nie Wuxiang revealed a bitter smile. She lowered her head to look at her gloved hands and said softly, "You should know what kind of cultivator my master is, right?" Mo Chinga didn't answer. She didn't understand what Nie Wuxiang meant. Nie Wuxiang sighed, then continued to say, "What the celestial pole says is correct. He's indeed neither a human nor a ghost, neither a Taoist nor a devil. He can't be considered a real person at all. Although what I practice isn't his main cultivation technique, what kind of good things could he possibly teach me? I'm a martial cultivator, yet I've almost reached my current level without any bottlenecks in just over 100 years because he used his own primordial devil aura to open up all my meridians." At this point, she saw Mo Chinga's shocked expression, so her smile became even more bitter. "Correct. From another perspective, I'm also not a pure person. Every once in a while, the primordial devil aura in my body will flare up. At that time, I'd rather die than live." Mo Chinga sucked in a breath of cold air when she heard this. She really didn't expect Master Song Feng to treat his disciple like this. "Is the thing you stole from Tianyan sect related to this?" "Correct." Nie Wuxiang was still staring at her hand in a daze. "Since I left Master, I wanted to live like a human. After I arrived on North Pole Island, I inquired everywhere for a way to eliminate the primordial devil aura. Finally, I heard that Tianyan sect had a treasure." At this point, she looked up at Mo Chinga and revealed a mocking smile. "Everyone says Yunzhong cultivators are more powerful than celestial pole cultivators. In my opinion, it's just that the way they fight is a bit strange. They can't be considered powerful." Mo Chinga was silent. Nie Wuxiang was a martial cultivator, so her way of fighting was very different from Dao cultivators. The 2 main characteristics of Yunzhong cultivators in fights of magical powers, speed and control of spiritual aura, were useless against her, so it was no wonder she said that. "Then what's next?" Mo Chinga asked. "How long are you going to hide here?" Nie Wuxiang said indifferently, "It won't be too long. That group of idiots won't be able to find me. 3 days later, I'll disguise myself as a cultivator going out to sea and leave North Pole Island." She stared at Mo Chinga, her gaze flickering. "Of course, if you're still afraid I'll implicate you, I can also leave." Mo Chinga stared at her, raised her eyebrows and smiled. "What? You want to provoke me to help you?" Nie Wuxiang was stunned, but she soon smiled helplessly. "Alright, we're not enemies now, but we're not friends either. I just want to stay here. If you want to drive me away, I can't do anything about it, but if you don't, I won't leave." Chapter 353. Nie Wuxiang looked very calm, as if she wasn't worried about being captured by Tianyan sect at all. Mo Chinga stared at her for a while, then suddenly asked, "Did you notice me that day in Jade Qilin Pavilion?" The smile on Nie Wuxiang's face froze and she stared at her. "Do you want to ask if I led them to chase you?" "You can say that," Mo Chinga admitted frankly. She was naturally suspicious. Since she wasn't going to be enemies with Nie Wuxiang, it would always be a thorn in her heart if she didn't clarify this matter. "No." Mo Chinga breathed a sigh of relief when she heard Nie Wuxiang's answer. She then asked, "Then when did you notice me?" "It was also around that time." Nie Wuxiang said, "That day I left the Jade Qilin Pavilion and hid my tracks. Who would have thought those Tianyan sect cultivators would chase after you? I followed them out of curiosity and found out it was actually you. Furthermore, you're also living here just like me." Nie Wuxiang also felt this matter was inconceivable. She originally thought she and Mo Chinga walked 2 completely different paths. Now that Mo Chinga had a Dao companion to accompany her in her cultivation, she should be proud of herself in the celestial pole. She didn't expect Mo Chinga would escape in a sorry state just like her and arrive in Yunzhong thousands of miles away. Mo Chinga stared at her for a long time, making Nie Wuxiang feel strange. She then asked, "Why are you pestering me? With fellow Taoist Nie's personality, don't you prefer to be alone?" The smile on Nye Wuxiang's face suddenly disappeared. She stared at Emo Chenga silently for a long time before she said, "Can I not answer?" Emo Chenga gave her a deep look then nodded. "Up to you." She straightened her body, brushed her sleeves, then sat down on her praying mat. "If you want to stay here, I won't drive you away. You can do as you please." Nye Wuxiang watched as Emo Chenga closed her eyes and began to meditate, no longer prepared to pay attention to her. She then looked down at her gloved hands and suddenly felt very confused. After so many years she finally escaped. But how could she continue on this path? She couldn't help but look at Emo Chenga, who was meditating with her eyes closed and seemed completely defenseless against her. Could this person give her an answer? Emo Chenga opened her eyes and stared at Nye Wuxiang, who was cultivating freely in the corner. She couldn't help but smirk. The reason she let Nye Wuxiang stay here without worry was naturally because she had confidence in her unique formation. As long as Nye Wuxiang made any strange movements, she could instantly kill her. However, from the looks of it now, Nye Wuxiang really didn't have any hostility towards her. In fact, it could even be said that she was a bit too close to her. How could ordinary people cultivate in the same room as other cultivators? Even if they were friends, it was rare for them to be so close. Unless it was a matter of life and death, cultivators would never be willing to let others see them while they were cultivating. Because she had the formation to rely on, Nye Wuxiang's life and death were basically in her hands, which was why she dared to cultivate in front of her without any scruples. What was the reason for Nye Wuxiang's death? He dared to enter her heavily restricted cultivation room, dared to drink her tea and even dared to cultivate in front of her. She was Master Songfeng's disciple, so she should be very vigilant. Why did she trust her so much? This kind of feeling made Emo Chenga feel very strange. It wasn't that she didn't have friends. Shenqing School's Luo Fengxue Yi Jingwen, and the others could all be considered her good friends for many years. However, they were fellow disciples of the same sect, so their temperaments could also be considered congenial. But what about Nye Wuxiang? Nye Wuxiang's character and experience were worlds apart from hers. There was practically no similarity between them. She was Master Songfeng's disciple, so presumably she never lacked spirit stones or medicinal pills. However, she was casually beaten and scolded by her own master, so she almost had no self-respect at all. Would a person like her easily trust others? As for Emo Chenga herself, although she wandered from place to place when she was young and lacked medicinal pills, second uncle still gave her meticulous care. After losing second uncle, she got her master, Qin Shi, and some friends. It was precisely because of this kind of experience that although she developed a suspicious and cautious personality, she would also trust others and believe in the truth. She and Nye Wuxiang were basically two different kinds of people. What was even more strange was that, according to reason, she didn't reject trusting others, and Nye Wuxiang had saved her before, so it was normal for her to have a certain amount of goodwill towards Nye Wuxiang. However, based on Nye Wuxiang's experience growing up, she should be wary of her. Why did she seem more at ease than Emo Chenga? Emo Chenga felt she couldn't guess Nye Wuxiang's thoughts at all. She had never met someone like Nye Wuxiang, but this Nye Wuxiang couldn't be deduced with common sense. "Why are you looking at me?" Nye Wuxiang suddenly opened her eyes. Emo Chenga showed a faint smile and said calmly, "I'm wondering what you're thinking in the end." Nye Wuxiang was stunned, but she soon revealed a faint smile and said, "Then why don't you just ask? But you didn't answer me before." Emo Chenga stared at her and said, "I really don't understand why you trust me so much." Nye Wuxiang hung her head and was silent for a long time before she finally said, "I don't know. Maybe after leaving Master I just want to try living another kind of life. Even if that's the case, why did it have to be me? Aren't you afraid I'll attack you for cultivating in my place without any vigilance?" Nye Wuxiang chuckled at this question and raised her head to look at Emo Chenga. "Just take it as my intuition that you can trust me." Emo Chenga was silent and didn't say anything else. Nye Wuxiang sighed softly, then closed her eyes again, hiding the loneliness in them. In fact, she still didn't say the real reason. Ever since she was a child, she had always dreamed of escaping that terrifying master and living a new life. But when she realized her dream, she found herself at a loss. How could she be considered a person if she lived like a person? She wanted to walk under the sun, talk and laugh with others, have a strong heart and be willing to trust others. But now, her primordial devil aura was hidden deep in her meridians, so she still couldn't be considered a person. In the past year, she restrained her spiritual breath and hid in this inn, looking for a way to dissolve the primordial devil aura while thinking about what she should do next. After so many years, she already didn't know how to interact with people. How could she start the life she wanted? At this time she saw Mo Chenga again, the person she envied and felt ashamed of. She suddenly thought that maybe this was her beginning. This was a rare old friend, who knew her background and didn't need to explain anything. Most importantly, Mo Chenga saved her, so she could gamble on whether there was goodwill between them, or even whether a friendship could be established. What if Mo Chenga didn't trust her? She thought about this problem. At that time, a deep sense of fatigue welled up in her heart. If that was the case, then, just disappear. She laughed at herself for having such a world-hating idea. She escaped from the celestial pole with untold hardships and narrowly escaped death, but in the end she put her life in someone else's hands. However, she didn't want to change her decision. For so many years she had never controlled her own fate, so she was still at a loss even after breaking free from the shackles. That being the case, what if she let someone else decide for once? Now it seemed she had won the gamble. Mo Chenga didn't want to be her enemy. This made her feel a little meaning in life. Her life wasn't a failure. At least there was someone willing to accept her trust. Thinking of this, she suddenly felt a little hope in her loneliness. This kind of new beginning wasn't bad. 3 days later, Nie Wuxiang stopped cultivating and looked at the bright window. "You're leaving?" Mo Chenga opened her eyes and looked at her. And Nie Wuxiang didn't turn her head and just answered, "It's time." Mo Chenga thought for a while and finally asked, "Do you have a surefire way to leave?" Nie Wuxiang turned to look at her and said, "Are you leaving or not?" Mo Chenga was stunned for a moment, then she said with a smile, "If I go with you, does that mean I'm really your accomplice?" Nie Wuxiang shrugged and said indifferently, "Are you still worried about being implicated by me?" "I can't afford to provoke 2 nascent soul cultivators," Mo Chenga said faintly. "But I can't escape responsibility for this matter, so I'd better leave North Pole Island as soon as possible." Nie Wuxiang smiled. "So, you also plan to leave today?" Mo Chenga smiled without answering. Nie Wuxiang didn't say much. She began to disguise herself in front of Mo Chenga. She took out a bunch of strange things from her Chenkuan bag and started to wipe her face. All kinds of powdery things were smeared on her face. Some were red, some were yellow, and some were yellow. When she finished, her face became a strange waxy yellow. Then she added a mole, trimmed her eyebrows, and stuck a beard on her face. When she finished, she tied up her hair again, changed her clothes, and immediately turned into a skinny man. Mo Chenga saw her transformation with her own eyes, so she was very curious. "You're the secular world's disguise technique." Nie Wuxiang put away the things on the table, picked up a powder box, and shook it in front of her. "Do you want it?" Mo Chenga shook her head and looked at her carefully. She couldn't see any flaws, so she couldn't help but sigh. This is a good method. High-level cultivators can easily see through disguise technique, but the secular world's disguise technique can only be distinguished by eyesight. It's useless no matter how high your cultivation level is. It was also because of this reason that she disguised herself as a man when she entered Yunwu sect. Cultivators possessed magic power, so they often relied on their divine sense and neglected the most fundamental problem of disguise. However, Nie Wuxiang's methods were much more brilliant than hers. She almost became a different person. "I'm leaving." After putting away the things, Nie Wuxiang looked up at her. "Thank you for taking me in this time." Mo Chenga smiled and didn't stand on ceremony. She asked, "What's your plan after leaving North Pole Island?" "Naturally, I'm going to Yunzhong's inland," Nie Wuxiang said. "North Pole Island's transporting formation has something to do with Tianyin sect, so it's not convenient for me to use it. I can only disguise myself as a cultivator going out to sea and fly there directly. I'll probably go to Eastern Tang first. At that time, I hope we'll be fated to meet again." Mo Chenga nodded. Since she crossed the South Sea and came to Yunzhong, she could naturally fly directly from North Pole Island to Yunzhong's inland. She didn't need to worry about this at all. "All right, we'll meet again in the future." Nie Wuxiang sighed then smiled. She took out a bamboo hat from inside her robe and put it on her head. After Mo Chenga opened the restriction, she pushed the door open and walked out. Soon she disappeared without a sound. Mo Chenga stared at the place she left, silent for a long time. Chapter 354. Not long after Nie Wuxiang left, Mo Chenga stood up and put away her things. Although Nie Wuxiang had left, there were 2 nascent soul cultivators in Tianyin sect. What if they had some divine ability they didn't know about and found out? She might as well leave now before Tianyin sect suspected her. She entered the virtual sky world, put Xiaohua and Xiaofan into the spiritual beast bag, put away her magic weapons and other things one by one, and finally removed the formation of the cultivation room. Ian. Upon hearing her voice, Ian, who was watering the flowers outside the room, ran over. Nie Wuxiang left in front of her just now, but she didn't notice at all. Fairy, what's your order? I'm leaving, Mo Tiange said gently. She took out several spirit stones from her robe and gave them to her. These days you've served me very well. These spirit stones are your reward. I've already paid enough for the room. After I leave you just need to report to the shopkeeper. Ian was stunned. Fairy, you're leaving so soon? I've comprehended some profound principles during my cultivation these days, so I have to go back to inland Yunzhong first. We'll meet again if fate wills it. Mo Tiange said goodbye to her with a smile, then left the small courtyard. Fairy. Ian chased after her with the spirit stones in her hands. She wanted to thank her, but she found that there was no one outside the courtyard. She sighed regretfully and turned back silently. As a maid in this inn, she rarely met cultivators who were so easy to serve. She even gave her a lot of spirit stones before she left. She didn't know if she would have the chance to see her again in the future. After leaving the inn, Mo Tiange walked towards the free market. She had already inquired about the transporting formations to leave North Pole Island. There were several transporting formations on North Pole Island, and most of them were controlled by cultivation sections. Even if they didn't belong to any sect in name, they were more or less related to those sections. In other words, no matter which transporting formation she took, it was impossible to avoid Tianyan sect. Therefore, Mo Tiange chose the transporting formation belonging to Tianyan sect in the free market. Since she couldn't avoid it, she just borrowed the one belonging to Tianyan sect. Nie Wuxiang had already left. As long as she didn't show the slightest bit of guilt, Tianyan sect presumably wouldn't notice anything. He went to the Jade Qilin Pavilion with familiarity and greeted the cultivator who came to receive him. Then, with the guidance of the cultivator, he arrived at another hall where people were coming and going. This hall was much smaller than the one in the free market, and there were far fewer people here. After all, the teleportation fee wasn't cheap. Low-level cultivators often had to save up for a long time before they could even afford a single teleportation. As soon as Mo Tiange entered the hall, she sensed a cultivator's divine sense sweeping past her body. In a split second, her fine hair stood on end. She unconsciously became vigilant, because this divine sense belonged to a nascent soul cultivator. Tianyan sect's nascent soul cultivators had really set out? Mo Tiange was rather astonished. What exactly did Nie Wuxiang steal? Since it was placed in the Jade Qilin Pavilion, it shouldn't be important enough for a nascent soul cultivator to come out and search for it, right? Although Mo Tiange had a lot of questions in her heart, her expression didn't change. Like the other cultivators, she walked to the transporting formation to register. Upon seeing that she was a core formation cultivator, the aura refining disciple in charge of registration respectfully asked her to wait on the side. The several foundation building cultivators who were in charge of the formation, however, stared at her with vigilance as if they were facing a formidable enemy. Mo Tiange showed a faint smile and pretended she didn't feel anything. While waiting, she leisurely sipped her tea. Tianyan sect seemed to be quite wealthy. The tea leaves served to guests in Jade Qilin Pavilion were unexpectedly so rich in spiritual aura. After a while, someone hurriedly came out of the inner wing and walked towards her. Mo Tiange raised her head to look and smiled. What a coincidence, it was unexpectedly that Madame Chizu again. Upon seeing her, Madame Chizu also smiled without saying anything. The two of them greeted each other with great tacit understanding. Fellow Taoist Chizu. Fellow Taoist Qingwei. After greeting each other, Madame Chizu asked with a smile, Fellow Taoist Qingwei, are you leaving North Pole Island? Why don't you stay for a few more days? Mo Tiange answered with a smile, I suddenly had an epiphany while cultivating recently, so I need to go back to inland Yunzhong as soon as possible. Fated chances wait for no man. Although I haven't strolled around North Pole Island enough, I have no choice but to leave. I see. No cultivator would doubt this reason. For cultivators, nothing was more important than fated chances. Mo Tiange looked around, then asked with a hint of curiosity, Fellow Taoist Chizu, could it be that you still haven't found that thief? Although there were no core formation cultivators at the scene, these foundation building cultivators nervously checked the cultivators who left. There were also nascent soul cultivators overseeing the scene. Once they found a core formation cultivator, Madame Chizu even came out to personally check. This was an extraordinarily grand display. Mo Tiange couldn't help but worry. Although Nie Wuxiang was only disguised as a cultivator who went to sea, presumably they also checked her, right? She wondered if she passed. Madame Chizu smiled helplessly. Yes, my nascent soul martial uncle from my sect ordered us to carefully check all the cultivators who left North Pole Island during this period of time. Fellow Daoist Qingwei, you don't mind, right? Mo Qingge was worried, but her expression was indifferent. She said, Fellow Daoist, please go ahead and check. I just hope you can let me leave as soon as possible. If I miss this fated chance, I don't know when the next one will be. That's natural, Madame Chizu readily agreed, then said, Fellow Daoist Qingwei, please. Mo Qingge stood up and followed Madame Chizu into an empty wing room. Madame Chizu took out a jade plate, circled Mo Qingge, and carefully examined it twice. In the end, she heaved a sigh of relief and said with a smile, All right, fellow Daoist can go and handle the formalities. Upon hearing this, Mo Qingge's tense nerves relaxed. She felt the divine sense entangling her finally dissipate. She still had the same expression on her face as she cupped her hands and bowed to Madame Chizu. Fellow Daoist Chizu, I'll take my leave now. Until we meet again. Until we meet again. It's really not a good time for me to meet fellow Daoist. My sect just happened to have a major event. If fellow Daoist comes to North Pole Island again in the future, I'll play the role of a host. Madame Chizu walked her to the transporting formation and told the disciple guarding it to waive her teleportation fee. The two of them exchanged pleasantries again before they formally said their goodbyes. With Madame Chizu's permission, the attitude of the several foundation building cultivators guarding the transporting formation immediately became much more polite. They asked respectfully, May I know where Senior wants to be teleported to? Mo Qingge smiled and asked, How many places can your transporting formation teleport to? Senior, our transporting formation teleports to 3 places: Eastern Tang State, Southern Zhou State, and Northern Lin State. Mo Qingge said, To Eastern Tang State. Is it directly teleported to the capital? No. The foundation building cultivator spread the map and pointed at Eastern Tang State. Senior, please take a look. Our teleportation location is here. It's called Sky Snow City. Here? Mo Qingge mumbled, It seems a bit far. The foundation building cultivator showed an apologetic expression. The capital is too far and the teleportation fee is too high. However, there's also a transporting formation in Sky Snow City, so it should be very convenient for Senior to return to the sect. Mo Qingge knew he misunderstood, but she didn't explain. It would be advantageous for her if others thought she was a cultivator from Eastern Tang State. If they knew she came from the distant celestial pole, who knew whether someone would want to get something from her out of curiosity? She nodded. All right, Sky Snow City it is. Chapter 355. This was a city located in the northern part of Yunzhong. The snow-white city walls were made of a special kind of white stone. The rows of buildings in the city were all made of stone without exception. Under the clear blue sky, there was a city that was as white as snow. The white was distinct and the blue was clear. Looking at the beautiful scene in front of her, Mo Qingge couldn't help but sigh. No wonder this city was called Sky Snow City. The blue sky and white snow really lived up to its name. Senior, do you want a map? A detailed map of Sky Snow City, including all cultivators' immortals' caves that can be rented and the market square's location. Senior, are you looking for someone or traveling? Do you need a guide? Senior. As soon as she came out of the transporting formation, Mo Qingge was surrounded by a group of people who introduced her to various things. There were many cultivators coming and going. Although most of them were aura-refining cultivators, it still made her sigh. Yunzhong was indeed a holy land for cultivation. It wasn't like a cultivation city like Kuanzhong City, which also had such an atmosphere. In the end, she just bought a map of Sky Snow City and sent the others away. Although Sky Snow City wasn't the capital of Eastern Tang, it was still a big city. According to the map, this city had a history of more than 10,000 years. Because there was a white stone mountain nearby, the city was built with mountain stones. The city was like snow, so it was called Sky Snow City. It was said that the white stones of Sky Snow City were extremely hard, like jade, and had the function of gathering spiritual aura. Although they were far inferior to spirit stones, they were better than nothing. Therefore, there were many middle and low-level cultivators living in this city. They called the white stones white spirit stones and jokingly called the houses they lived in spirit stone houses, which was very interesting. At the same time, Mo Qingge also discovered that Sky Snow City itself had a medium-sized spirit vein. Coupled with the function of white spirit stones, although it wasn't enough to build a sect, it was a blessed land for many individual cultivators. It was no wonder that so many individual cultivators gathered in this city. After leaving Tianyin Sect Station, Mo Chenga thought for a moment and decided to find a place to stay first. Among the 5 great sects of Eastern Tang, Wuxing Valley was remote, Hufa School was in the west, Jingshu School was near the capital, Danxia Sect was in the north, and Juyin Sect happened to be not far from Sky Snow City. Mo Chenga's primary purpose in coming to Yunzhong was to travel. Her secondary purpose was to go to Danxia Sect to investigate and find traces of Mo Yaoqing as well as the complete art of Sunu. However, Danxia Sect was, after all, a great cultivation group in Yunzhong, and Mo Yaoqing was a trader, so it was unwise to ask her directly. They could only slowly get in touch with her and slowly figure things out. Therefore, under the current circumstances, it would be better for him to stay in Sky Snow City first, get in touch with the people of the Juyin Sect, and find out more about the situation of the Dawning Pill Sect. Sky Snow City was originally built on a mountain, and the entire city was built on Whitestone Mountain. Whether it was the city walls or the houses, they were all made from local materials. Thus, the direction of the city was also uneven. Mo Chenga followed the map and headed towards the mountainside. According to the map, the majority of Sky Snow City was the property of the Ling clan, the largest cultivation clan in the Juyin Sect. The Ling clan was located at the top of White Rock Mountain, occupying the area with the densest spirit qi. At the bottom of the mountain there were many cave dwellings. These cave dwellings were of different sizes and had different spiritual qi. They were all for rent. Rogue cultivators who came to Sky Snow City would rent cave dwellings from the Ling clan regardless of whether they were staying for a long time or for a short period of time. When she reached the mountainside, Mo Chenga looked at the map then turned left according to the directions on the map. This White Rock Mountain was obviously a mine. There was very little vegetation here, there was only a small amount of yellow soil and some drought-resistant shrubs. Mo Chenga thought that the cultivators of Sky Snow City should be lacking in spiritual plants, right? She wondered what they used to concoct medicinal pills. As she was walking, she suddenly felt a spiritual aura fluctuation. Mo Chenga's gaze shifted, but she continued to walk forward as if nothing had happened. When she passed by a shrub, spiritual aura suddenly fluctuated above her head. A golden net came down from above, covering her completely in an instant. Ha 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 ha. Seeing that she couldn't move and was covered by the golden net, 2 cultivators came out from behind the mountain rock. One of them laughed. "Big brother, I told you no one could escape our inescapable net. What do you think?" These 2 cultivators were both in the foundation building realm. One of them had a messy beard on his face, so his appearance couldn't be seen clearly. The other had shifty eyes and looked very wretched. He was the one who spoke. The former was in the middle stage of the foundation building realm while the latter was in the early stage. The big man with the messy beard was very cautious. He frowned and reminded them, "Don't be arrogant. This person's cultivation level is higher than ours. No matter how high his cultivation level is, he still can't break the inescapable net, right?" The wretched man stared at Mo Chenga trapped in the golden net with a smile. He licked his lips and said, "Big brother, this woman looks pretty good. Look, don't talk nonsense." Before he could finish, the big man with the beard reprimanded him. "We stopped this robbery because we had no other choice. It's fine if we get the money. Have you forgotten the commandments?" "Commandments?" The wretched man snorted disdainfully. He was very dissatisfied. "Big brother, have you forgotten that we've been driven out? We're individual cultivators now. What does the commandments have to do with us?" The big man with the beard's eyes flashed. He then said with a heavy voice, "Whether we've been driven out or not, we still want to continue cultivating, so we can't forget the commandments. Aren't you afraid of the inner demon of core-formation?" Upon hearing this, the wretched man was finally persuaded. He said reluctantly, Okay, I understand." Right after he finished speaking, he saw Mo Chenga struggling in the golden net. He squinted his eyes and teased her with a smile, "Miss, don't struggle anymore. This is an inescapable net, a magic weapon. Although your cultivation level is higher than ours, once you're trapped in the inescapable net, you'll still be trampled on." Mo Chenga stopped struggling and stared coldly at the 2 men. "What do you want?" "What do I want?" The wretched man stroked his mustache and stared at Mo Chenga's face with a covetous gaze. "Hand over your Chenkuan bag." Mo Chenga didn't move. She just stared at them. Seeing that she didn't move for a long time, the wretched man became impatient. He pulled the knot in the net and said, "Hurry up or I'll also rob you. Junior Marshal brother." Right after he finished speaking, the big man with the beard shouted and stared at him with raised eyebrows. Under his gaze, the wretched man became weak and muttered, Okay, I understand." The big man with the beard looked at Mo Chenga and said gently, "Fellow Taoist, Junior Marshal brother, and I have no choice but to do this shady business. I can guarantee we won't hurt you." Mo Chenga stared at the big man with the beard and sneered. "What's the difference between wanting my Chinkuan bag and wanting my life? For cultivators, don't tell me you don't know the importance of a Chinkuan bag?" The big man with the beard was speechless. After a while he finally said, "Then you just need to hand over some spirit stones." Mo Chenga stared at him and couldn't help but narrow her eyes. "I only want spirit stones. Aren't you afraid I'll kill you after you let me go?" The big man with the beard shook his head. We have our own ways. Big brother, why are you talking to her so much? In any case, we've already done it." The wretched man couldn't wait to interrupt their conversation. He stared at Mo Chenga with an ominous glint in his eyes. "My big brother is easy to talk to, but I'm not. If you don't hand over the spirit stones, I'll give you a bit of suffering." As he spoke, he pulled the knot in his hand. Mo Chenga wrinkled her brows. She felt pain in the places covered by the golden net. She was a bit surprised. Martial Uncle Jinyang said most cultivators in Yunzhong had magic weapons that could control spiritual aura. She didn't expect that these two foundation-building cultivators would also have magic weapons that could control spiritual aura. "Junior Marshal brother," the big man with the beard shouted again. "Big brother?" The wretched man said unhappily, "Since we've already decided to do this, why should we be afraid of the slightest thing? What's the point of doing this?" The big man with the beard's eyes dimmed. He lowered his head and said nothing. Mo Chenga's gaze shifted to the two of them and she asked, "Why did you two set up an ambush here? Isn't this the way to Ling Clan? Presumably there should be a lot of people here. Aren't you afraid of being bumped into by others?" This was exactly what puzzled her. She'd been trapped here for so long but no one had come. Ling Clan? Ah. Upon hearing her question, the wretched man laughed triumphantly and said, "There are so many idiots in this world. Who said this road leads to Ling Clan?" Mo Chenga wrinkled her brows and said slowly, "That map is fake? You're still too stupid." The wretched man smiled until his eyes narrowed. "This idea isn't bad, right? A fat sheep that just arrived in Sky Snow City, a lone cultivator, as long as we tamper with the map a bit, will naturally come here." Mo Chenga's expression darkened. "You, quickly hand over your Chinkuan bag." The wretched man lost his patience and shouted, "If you don't hand it over, I won't be polite." "Be polite? I'd like to see how you're going to be rude." Under their gazes, Mo Chenga waved her sleeves. The spiritual aura in her body surged, and the momentum of a core formation cultivator instantly spread. The golden net covering her body fluttered without any wind. The big man with the beard was shocked and shouted, "You're in the core formation realm." The wretched man was stunned for a moment, then he hastily made a hand seal, trying to retract the golden net. Mo Chenga snorted coldly and gently raised her hand. The wretched man immediately felt a strong pressure coming from the other side. His face instantly turned red and beads of sweat appeared on his forehead. "Senior!" the big man with the beard shouted. He didn't dare to step forward and took out his Chinkuan bag. "Senior, please let go of my junior marshal brother. I'm willing to offer all my belongings to you." Mo Chenga cast a glance at the big man. He was actually smart. He knew he couldn't resist and immediately begged for mercy. Unfortunately, it was too late. Mo Chenga only glanced at him once, then withdrew her gaze. Under the surging spiritual aura, her sleeves fluttered even though there was no wind. She opened and closed her right palm. The wretched man let out an "ah," and could only watch helplessly as the golden net in his hand was taken by her. The wretched man was so shocked that he couldn't react. Mo Chenga was angry at his frivolous words just now, so she didn't show any mercy. She gathered spiritual aura in her hand and struck him. Ah! With a blood-curdling scream, the wretched man was sent flying and crashed into a rock. His head tilted to one side and his whole body softly fell to the ground. He was no longer breathing. "Junior Marshal brother." The big man with the beard widened his eyes and threw himself at him. He was stunned when he realized he was no longer breathing. After a while he suddenly turned to look at Mo Chenga. "You, what? Do you want revenge?" Mo Chenga raised her eyebrows and asked when she saw the fierce glint in the man's eyes. The man was stunned at first, but soon after, his expression turned sorrowful and his whole body softened. A core formation cultivator? He was merely in the middle stage of the foundation building realm. How could he take revenge? Mo Chenga couldn't help but feel strange when she saw the man's appearance. Based on their conversation just now, these two people didn't have the same temperament. Why did they block the road and rob people together? This whole thing was strange. What was going on? Chapter 356. The bearded man hugged his companion and sobbed. Mo Chenga watched as the tall and strong man cried miserably, and the strange feeling in her heart grew stronger. What was the relationship between these two people? Their personalities were obviously very different, but they seemed to be very close to each other, and they even had some kind of commandment. After crying for a while, the man wiped his face dejectedly when he saw Mo Chenga. "Senior, if you want to kill us, just kill us. We offended you first, so we can only blame ourselves for not following the commandment and not knowing how to recognize people." Mo Chenga frowned and stared at the man without saying anything. After a while, seeing that she didn't want to attack, the man raised his head and looked at her with puzzled eyes. "Senior, are you a Buddhist cultivator?" Mo Chenga suddenly asked. There was a flash of hesitation in the big man's eyes. He paused for a moment and finally nodded. "Yes, Junior is a Buddhist cultivator, sure enough." In Yunzhong, Buddhist cultivators were different from Tao cultivators. They had stricter commandments. However, she felt it was quite strange. That wretched man was fine, but this man obviously cared about commandments from time to time, so why did he rob passers-by with her? "Since you're a Buddhist cultivator, why did you pretend to be a Tao cultivator and rob people here? Am I the first person you robbed?" Upon hearing this question, the man fell silent. After a while, he smiled bitterly and said, "Senior, this is my secret and I'll never tell anyone. You were indeed the first person we robbed. We hired a child to sell maps at the teleportation circle. If we took a fancy to someone, we would ask him to sell the tampered map to that person. Who knew that we would make a mistake at the first time? We really brought this upon ourselves." At this point, he sighed dejectedly. "Senior, if you want to kill me, just kill me. I have nothing to say." However, after he closed his eyes and waited for a long time, Mo Chenga only asked, "Where does the Ling house go?" The man opened his eyes and stared blankly at Mo Chenga. "You won't kill me?" Mo Chenga looked at him calmly and repeated, "Where does the Ling house go?" "Over there." He pointed at the road on the right in a daze. Mo Chenga nodded, then turned around and walked away. "Senior?" the man shouted behind her. Mo Chenga stopped and her gaze turned cold. "What? Do you want me to kill you?" The burly man hurriedly shook his head and said, "That inescapable net." Mo Chenga couldn't help but laugh. "Could it be that you still want to go back?" The burly man was silent. He knew that this was just wishful thinking. They blocked the road and robbed a core formation senior. It was already good enough that the senior didn't kill them. How could they possibly return the magic treasure to him? It was just that, if he lost his life, then it would have been fine. He wouldn't have thought about anything else. But now, his junior brother was dead and the heaven and earth net was lost, but he was left with his life. How could he face his master? No, he couldn't continue to be dispirited like this. At the very least, he had to return to Mount Baifu. As he watched Mo Chenga's departing figure, the burly man's gaze gradually became fervent. Once she was back on the right path, she took out the golden net from her sleeve and examined it carefully. This net was woven from an unknown golden thread. It was exquisite and light as if it was weightless. The spiritual energy attached to it was very strange. It was very different from the spiritual energy of cultivators. Could it be Buddhist energy? After thinking for a while, she shook her head, threw the golden net into her Chengkuan bag and continued forward. In fact, if she wanted to know the inside story, she could have used the soul-searching technique on that burly man. However, this wasn't a big deal, so it wasn't worth it. For the current her, this was a trivial matter. She hated that wretched man, so she just killed him. If she didn't want to kill the bearded burly man, then she wouldn't kill him. There was no need to think about the consequences. With strength, many problems wouldn't be a problem. After taking the path on the right, a courtyard made of white stones soon appeared in front of him. At the entrance of the courtyard, there were several low-level aura refining cultivators guarding the door. If any cultivators came to visit, they would chat with them. As Mo Chenga approached, someone immediately came to greet her. "Senior, are you here to rent an immortal's cave?" Mo Chenga nodded. "Yes." That person immediately said, "Please come with me." Mo Chenga followed the aura refining cultivator into the courtyard and into a room. This room looked like an ordinary study, similar to Xianqing School's steward's hall. There was a wide table on one side, and a foundation building cultivator was lying motionlessly on the table, holding a wine bottle in his hand. The whole room reeked of alcohol. When the aura refining cultivator who led Mo Chenga into the room saw her eyebrows twitching unconsciously, he hastily opened the window then stepped forward to push the seemingly drunk foundation building cultivator. Second uncle, second uncle. After a while the cultivator finally moved. Without raising his head, he said with dissatisfaction, "What do you want?" The aura refining cultivator smiled apologetically. "Second uncle, there's a foundation building senior here to rent an immortal's cave." After a while the cultivator finally reacted. He rubbed his eyes, stretched his body and shifted his gaze to Mo Chenga. Seeing that Mo Chenga was a young woman, the cultivator slightly curbed his arrogance and said, "Fellow Taoist, are you here to rent an immortal's cave?" Mo Chenga answered calmly. This cultivator from Ling clan looked very young. He looked to be about 30 years old. He had a short beard and a ruddy complexion. Unfortunately he was too slovenly and looked very sloppy. The cultivator glanced at her then pointed at the chair across from him. "Please sit." Mo Chenga looked at the dark blue Taoist robe at the cuffs of his sleeves then at the chair. After a moment of hesitation she cautiously sat down. Upon seeing her expression, the cultivator probably felt embarrassed. His face turned slightly red and he rolled up his sleeves. "May I know what kind of immortal's cave fellow Taoist wants to rent?" Mo Chenga said, "I'm not familiar with Sky Snow City, so I don't know what's different about the immortal's cave your manor rents. Fellow Taoist, please tell me." "Oh, I see." The cultivator nodded then took a scroll from the table. He then spread it open with his hand. This scroll was extremely large and practically covered the entire table. The shape of a mountain was drawn on it. Obviously it was a map of Whitestone Mountain. Between the mountain rocks, there were many circles drawn. These circles varied in size and color. Some were white, some were blue, some were green and some were purple. Some were ticked and some weren't. The cultivator from Ling clan said, "Our Ling clan's immortal's cave is divided into 4 kinds according to the spiritual aura. The purple one has the richest spiritual aura, the green one is barely passable, the blue one is slightly worse, and the white one only has a little bit of spiritual aura. The size of the circles indicates the size of the immortal's cave. A small immortal's cave only has 3 stone rooms, while a medium-sized immortal's cave has everything you need. A cultivation room, a spiritual beast room, a pill concocting room, a medicinal garden. Whatever you want, you can have it. A large immortal's cave not only has all these, but it also has a cultivation room for disciples and juniors. As for the price, the bigger the immortal's cave, the more expensive it is." At this point, the cultivator raised his head and glanced at Mo Chenga. "Is fellow Taoist alone?" "Yes." "If fellow Taoist is alone, it doesn't need to be too big. You can choose a small or medium-sized one." Mo Chenga nodded, expressing her agreement. "Then what's the price according to the spiritual aura?" The cultivator didn't answer her question. Instead he asked, "Fellow Taoist, do you want to stay here permanently or temporarily?" Mo Chenga thought for a moment then said, "Maybe for a few months, maybe for a year or 2. Then it's neither too long nor too short." The cultivator muttered to himself then said, "Fellow Taoist, we rent caves on a daily basis and an annual basis. The daily rent is 3 times higher than the annual rent. If you want to stay for more than 4 months, we'll rent it annually. Otherwise we'll rent it daily." Mo Chenga thought for a moment then said, "Then we'll rent it annually." The cultivator nodded. According to the medium-sized immortal's cave, the annual rent is 400 spirit stones for a purple immortal's cave, 280 spirit stones for a green immortal's cave, 150 spirit stones for a blue immortal's cave, and only 30 spirit stones for a white immortal's cave. He quickly sized up Mo Chenga then said, "Fellow Taoist, you're a foundation building cultivator and your cultivation level is quite high. Not to mention the purple immortal's cave, I think you should be able to afford the green and blue immortal's caves." Mo Chenga said, 280 spirit stones a year, 150 spirit stones a year. This price isn't low, right? Even if it was a white immortal's cave, which cost 30 spirit stones a year, ordinary aura refining cultivators couldn't afford it. Back when she was in Yunwu sect, she only had to pay 5 spirit stones a month. The Ling clan cultivator laughed and said, "Fellow Taoist, don't look down on Ling clan's immortal's cave. Even if it's a white immortal's cave, it's still much better than other places in Sky Snow City. Coupled with the function of white spirit stones, it's very difficult to find an immortal's cave like this in other cities. What he said wasn't false. For example, on North Pole Island, the inn's small courtyard cost 1 spirit stone a day, which was equivalent to more than 300 spirit stones a year. Moreover, the spiritual aura there was only average. On her way here, Chenga only felt that although the spirit veins here were also average, when paired with white spirit stones, they could be considered above average. Alright, Chenga said, I want a blue immortal's cave. A small one is fine. How many spirit stones? When the Ling clan cultivator heard this, he glanced at her with slight astonishment, but he didn't say anything. He just answered, 80 spirit stones a year. This price was also affordable for ordinary foundation building cultivators. Chenga nodded, took out a small bag of spirit stones from her Chenkuan bag, handed it over and poured it on the table. This is a year's rent. The Ling clan cultivator roughly glanced at it, then flicked his sleeve. In an instant, only a few spirit stones remained on the table. Chenga looked down and was a bit surprised. She didn't count them in detail, she just roughly counted them. This cultivator only glanced at them, but he actually counted them? After receiving the spirit stones, the Ling clan cultivator said, Alright fellow Taoist, you can see for yourself where you want to live. If there's no tick, it means there's currently no one living there. You can choose whichever you like. Chenga put away the few remaining spirit stones on the table, then lowered her head to look at the scroll. In the end, she chose a small blue circle in the corner. I'll stay here. The Ling clan cultivator nodded. He gathered spiritual aura on his fingertips and pointed at the small blue circle. The circle shone with a blue light and a tick appeared. Then he took out a jade tablet from his Chenkuan bag, cast a spell on it and handed it over. This is the Immortal's Cave tablet. Fellow Taoist, keep it well. Chenga took it. Thank you. The Ling clan cultivator waved his hand and shouted, Shaoshan, come here. The low-level cultivator who led Chenga into the Immortal's Cave hurriedly ran inside. Second uncle. The cultivator pointed at Chenga. Take her to Immortal's Cave number 23. Yes. The low-level cultivator turned to Chenga. Senior, please. When Chenga walked out of the room, she couldn't help but shake her head when she saw the Ling clan cultivator holding the wine bottle again. There were actually cultivators in this world who loved wine so much. After she walked far away, the Ling clan cultivator held the wine bottle, rubbed his nose and said to himself, he has so many treasures, but he only lives in a blue immortal's cave, and it's even a small one. He's really stingy. That you're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.